Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers, sisters, friends, and the foes out there, and welcome to another episode of the Blood Brothers podcast with your host, Dilly Hussain. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to remind all the avid podcast listeners that you can find this episode and all 4 seasons on all the major audio platforms. And if you're tuning in via YouTube, don't be cheeky, do remember to click subscribe to the 5 Pillars YouTube channel. Today's guest requires no introduction. He's a dear friend, a dear brother. This is his second appearance. A formidable orator, a well-respected and well-renowned pundit when it comes to the affairs of the Middle East and North Africa and the broader Muslim world. And that's the journalist and activist from the international interest, Brother Sami Hamdi. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Sami, how are you, brother?
Alhamdulillah, Habib, how are you?
I'm good. One request.
Go ahead.
It's a minor one. Just change my name on your phone to Muhammad Jalal too.
He always mentions you whenever we're doing the podcast as well. He's like, are you going to go to Dilly as well? And I'm like, to be honest, though, I haven't set a date with him and I'm flying tomorrow. I'm going this.
I've actually did my 6th episode
But
review.
I'm here in London. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. A lot of travels.
Alhamdulillah.
How's it been?
Well, alhamdulillah, it's good to go across to see different Muslim communities and even non-Muslim communities as well, actually. To see how humanity is one, the da'wah is one, and the fitrah is one. And I'll give you an example. I was in San Diego, California, and I think I'll never forget this. So I'm giving a talk and half the audience, so maybe like 40% of the audience is white American. So I finished the talk. It was about Gaza and how...
White American Muslim?
No, white Americans, non-Muslims.
Okay.
In California. So after I finished, there's like 30 of them, they come up and there's an older lady, she's speaking on their behalf. And she says to me, she goes to me, Mr. Hamdi, we just want to let you know we're lifelong Democrat voters. I said, okay, welcome. And she said, but this year we're not voting Democrat. And she started crying, Dilly. Like, you know when you're confused, you don't know what to do in that situation. She starts crying. So I said to her, why? She said, those images, those videos, the children being killed. And she's weeping. And the people around her start crying as well. They're like, we can't get them out. We never knew this stuff was happening. We never knew this was happening on the other side of the world. We never knew this is what our government was doing, what they were supporting, etc. And we will never let them get away with genocide. We're not going to be voting Democrat. And we're not. So I thought, let me do what the Muslims were hounding me with. What about Trump? What about Trump? What about Trump? What about Trump? So I said to her, what about Trump? And she said, Mr. Hamdi, we fought Trump before, we'll fight Trump again. But we are going to fight genocide today and fascism tomorrow. We don't want to be a society that forgives genocide just because we want the comfort of avoiding fascism later when we see all those kids who are being bombed. As a joke, I said to her, can I invite you next week to give khutbah at some of the masajid so that you can speak to them? But my point is, when you hear those, I remember meeting a black African-American pastor. I was sitting with my father one day and he said to me, son, listen to me. You know, da'wah is not just for Muslims. Da'wah is for non-Muslims. Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. My son, when you speak to people, when you speak to Americans, to Australians, my son, remember when they listen to you, speak in a way of true da'wah, which is when the Muslim and non-Muslim hear you, you're speaking to... So I said to him, Baba, what's your suggestion? He said to me, go and meet some of the African-American, you know, like pastors and stuff, and hear their opinion. Tell them, Sami, how, you know, if Jesus was Jesus would never tolerate this. Jesus would never see this. So I remember meeting an African-American pastor, and I remember Dilly saying to him, for 2 hours, we're having coffee. And I'm like, you know, sir, if Jesus was alive, they'd bomb Jesus. If Mary was alive, they'd bomb Mary. You know, alayhim salam, you know, all of them. If the 3 wise men that you have in your... They'd bomb them. Zechariah, they'd bomb him. John the Baptist, they would bomb him. They would bomb him and then do an investigation and find there was no ill. And I'll never forget the African-American pastor. It was him and a few of his team. He stood up and he went, well, thanks for coming out. But we just want to let you know, our Christian values as African-Americans doesn't allow us to forgive genocide. Me and my congregation, we're planning to punish Joe Biden. The problem you got, Sami, is your own community. They're the ones who are undecided about whether to punish the Democrats or not.
Of course.
I met so many, and I say this, I met so many non-Muslims, and I say this for a purpose, for a reason, who are so committed and so convinced to punishing genocide, knowing they might suffer and struggle later, knowing it might result in an opening of a chapter where they might not be as comfortable as they were before, or where they might be required to struggle further. And what it did for me traveling, you were saying, how are the travels? And I don't want to talk about the tiredness of the traveling stuff. Instead, I want to focus on this part. It made me realize that even if you're sitting down and doing nothing, Allah is always in control of His affairs. The fitrah is working in overdrive. The da'wah is working in overdrive. There's a fitrah Allah put in everybody's heart that is resonating deeply with these affairs. And there was something wonderful but also humiliating about it, in that when you see these people, you realize Allah is not waiting for you to move. Allah is not waiting for you for events to happen. Allah operates on His own terms, in His own time, etc. Rather, the choice is whether you choose to move or not. So I actually argue that the traveling, although it's been a bit hectic, rough, etc., even though we're in the midst of a genocide and the like, and we're watching what's happening in Gaza, genocide in Sudan, ethnic cleansing of the Rohingya, in Myanmar and these other places as well, people aren't sitting down and doing nothing. And I think that made me more hopeful and more optimistic, not about what's coming next, but that it will get better so long as we keep moving, inshallah.
So it's not the crux of the conversation at all, but I just want to ask you from an observational point of view. You've been to the States a lot. You've got future visits coming up. Any differences and similarities between the different Muslim communities and our cousins from across the pond?
The US, they always ask, how would you compare the US and the UK Muslims with each other? And to be honest, I don't follow the debate too much. I have to hold my hands up. In the English-speaking da'wah world, I don't follow it too much, to be honest, which is why I tend to hear a lot of the discussion debates based on what you or Jalal or somebody else is telling me. And that's not to discredit the English-speaking world. It's not the world I grew up in necessarily. Sure. My dad was in Arabic television, so I grew up with, al-Arifi and Uthman al-Khamis and these others. So, first of all, to caveat, the UK is smaller than Texas. So it's actually more apt to compare the UK to California Muslims, UK to Texas, as opposed to the whole of the American continent. Okay. But let's suppose we stretch it and we compare the two. I think that if I had to put it in a very short way, I think the Americans dream bigger than us. I think that the UK Muslim doesn't realize the glass ceiling in their mentality in terms of what Muslims can achieve until they go to the US and they find that US Muslims, they dream bigger. I think we in the UK are better at preserving traditions. We're very good at preservation. Americans are good at innovation. And I don't mean bid'ah. Innovation, what I mean is innovating in da'wah. For example, you'll go to an area in America and the Imam will be talking about the development. You'll see their masajid. They've got sports facilities next to it. They've got babysitting facilities next to it. Their halaqat are attended by families. It's not like Oxford here where they kick out, our sisters for iftar. They've said to themselves that, we want to make the masjid the center, so they facilitate for it. But when you ask the Imams there why they did it, they'd be like, we noticed first youth were not coming to the masjid. So we thought, how could you bring the youth to the masjid? He goes, we set up a basketball court. Now the youth are praying 5 times in the masjid and attend the basketball court and they're attending the halaqat. We made it all like in one with the masjid. Then you'd be like, but I noticed a lot of families attend your halaqat. They said, we realized men were coming, but their families were not, and the mothers are the ones raising the children. It doesn't make sense to leave the mothers isolated and unable to access that. So what we did was, we set up a babysitting area, and you'll go like 8, 9 p.m. at Irving Masjid in Dallas, for example. Although Americans will say you're using Dallas as you go to New York or go to these other places as well. And you'll realize there's a lot of kids playing in that babysitting area, but a lot of mothers are attending the halaqat. Because the Imam of the masjid has said, I want the masjid to be the center of the community. I don't want people to adapt to a tradition of the masjid itself. I want the masjid to cater to I don't want the people to cater to the masjid. I want the masjid to cater to the people. Now, there are some of those examples do exist in the UK, but I think that the UK preserves the tradition of the masjid, which is the way it is, like back home in some of these other places.
It's not from a bad place, from a good place.
It's from a good place. I think that the Americans, what they did was they said that we have a different environment, different circumstances, different challenges that we want to, address. And so they adapted accordingly. I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm saying the Americans dream bigger in terms of the role of what the masjid could be. And they have the resources and the means in order to adapt, in order to implement it as well. I'm not saying one is necessarily better than the other. I also argue there's another thing they do well in America. And I'm going to get in a lot of trouble for this because somebody told me that this is a debate going on in Twitter. I think you guys call it, not you guys, I'm not from America, from UK. I think some people, they call it the celebrity Muslim culture, celebrity
Muslim culture.
But here's something that I noticed in America, which I haven't seen in the UK, and which made me, I've seen it in the Arab world. I've seen it now in the US, I haven't seen it in the UK. Which is that, you have, if let's say you have kids, and I have kids. I have my son Sulaiman 5, I have Selma 10 and Sulaiman 5. Sulaiman already knows about Ronaldo and Messi. I go to America and Sheikh Omar Suleiman will walk through, and all of these youth are rushing to be next to him. An Imam has been elevated in status in the eyes of the youth. Sheikh Yasir Qadhi, whether it's Ammar Shukri, whether it's, these others as well. There is something as a father that is wonderful about the idea that my youngsters idolize, or idolize is the wrong word, but rather respect an Imam to an extent. They want to be near the Imam. The Imam is not Ronaldo, not Messi, not, Tom Brady, not, for example, like David Beckham or the like. They want to be Omar Suleiman. My son, when he saw Omar Suleiman's Jannah series, I made him watch it. And then my son loved it, and so did my daughter. So somebody came out from Algeria, he brought, like the Gandora or whatever. Yeah. My son calls it, Baba, I said, what do you want to wear on Eid? He goes, I want to wear Omar Suleiman. MashaAllah. What I'm saying is that I know people believe that there are ills. I've spoken to a lot of friends about it as well.
Because it can go sideways as well.
But in America, what I found very interesting was, it's the way they've elevated the status of an Imam. Even if someone wants to call it rock star or the like, I think there's something wonderful about a community that elevates the Imam higher than the football player. The Imam higher than, the Imam higher I think there's something wonderful about that. So I asked I shouldn't have said his name, but in any case, I asked about it. And he had a theory which I thought was quite interesting, in which he said that here in America, they incentivize Imams in such a way that it becomes something that the talent of the community aspire to be like. So I thought about this for a while. Sometimes in communities, not all of them. Now, I know it sounds like I'm generalizing, and in this I am. This doesn't apply to specific communities. In many masajid, the Imam is somebody who couldn't do well at university, but he was good at memorizing Quran, so we put him as the Imam of the masjid.
Yes.
As a result, you don't send your kids to the Imam when you have a problem. You only send your kids to the Imam to hifz Quran, etc. In the US, in some of the masajid, I'm not saying this is all over. In some of the masajid, they transform the role of the Imam. They find somebody talented who could go and study astrophysics and study whatever, etc. And they might let him go and study it for 3 years. Then they'll come and tell him, listen, son, the Muslim community needs good Imams, etc. We've raised money here to send you to Azhar, to Medina, to go and study. And when you come back, we want you to take up a post in Dallas, or a post in Houston, or a post in whatever. He'll go and study 3, 4 years, 5 years, whatever, and he'll come back and they'll put him as the Imam, an American-born Muslim who is grounded in a tradition of what he studied abroad. And you realize that's what produces a Yasir Qadhi or Omar Suleiman or a Yasir Fahmi or Ammar Shukri or these ones. And that's what makes them resonate with the Muslim population so much that now you have an American Muslim population that has elevated these guys to a star status because they become so relevant to their communities and they're addressing a lot of the issues that are over there. When I come to the UK...
When you move into the US?
I'm not moving to the US. I want to be honest, sometimes, I'll sit with conversations and I'll entertain the idea of moving to the US. But when I land in London, every time I land in Heathrow, my heart goes, Alhamdulillah. Okay. I really like London. But let me give you an example here in the UK. When Sheikh Akram Nadwi, phenomenal individual,
sure,
expert in hadith. When Sheikh Suhail Hanif, I know him on a personal basis. I've traveled with him. The man, he doesn't like it when I say it because he's told me before. I consider him a modern Muslim genius. Bismillah, billah. Suhail Hanif walks in the UK. In the US, would be elevated. In the UK, I have to explain to people who Suhail Hanif is. Many people, you have to explain to who Sheikh Akram Nadwi is. Why? Because we don't have a culture in the UK whereby we elevate the scholars. We don't have a culture whereby we make them the examples that we want our kids to be like. They're only relevant when we have a problem. They're not relevant as far as career-wise is concerned. I appreciate what you said earlier when you said that, it could go left or right. I agree.
It can go sideways.
We've seen people, who've had those things before. But I also think that when we look at how we talk about Islamic history, who do we celebrate? Imam Malik is like a modern-day rock star. Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam al-Shafi'i, Ahmed ibn Hanbal, all these others, Suyuti. When we talk about these individuals, we've elevated them in rank.
Of course, 100%.
So it's not actually a new phenomenon when we talk about it. Now, I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm simply brainstorming observations that I'm relating to you over here. But I will say how I reacted as a father of kids when I went to America, in a way I have never reacted here in the UK. When I saw Muslims lining up because they are in admiration of a man of Allah, of ostensibly man of Allah, so no one talks about the scandals that happen, etc. I think if I was looking at my son Suleiman and I saw him in a room with Omar Suleiman, Cristiano Ronaldo, Lionel Messi, I don't know, like another whatever rock star, etc. Would you not be proud as a father if the first picture he wanted to take with was Sheikh Omar?
Of course.
Would you not? Would it not in your heart be like, this boy is raised right?
Yes, of course.
And this is why I think that, okay, you can criticize a celebrity da'wah culture where people want to come out and go and see it. But there's one final point I'll say here, which makes me laugh. There is a book called the Encyclopedia of Islamic Economics. Wonderful book. A former Algerian prime minister gathered a lot of the top scholars and they wrote their theories on Islamic economics. So in the book, there is a section about Abu Hanifa. Actually, let me correct myself. It could be in the book, The Four Imams. It's in one of the two books. The story of Abu Hanifa. So Abu Hanifa was not your standard scholar. He was a businessman and then became renowned because things he would say resonated more than the established scholars. So I don't want to put it in, I want to put it in a nice way. He was almost like an upstart, but in a halal way. The sense that you have your established scholars, and then this businessman Abu Hanifa is giving out also fatwa based on his understanding of that, and he ends up the rock star in such a way that everybody wants to debate Abu Hanifa. Abu Hanifa in his time is being derided by his peers. In his time, he's being accused as being somebody, you know, like, why are you sitting with Abu Hanifa? Why are you? Everyone wants to debate him, which leads me, and I'm stretching this a little bit, if Abu Hanifa was alive today, you know, rahmatullah alayh, I don't know if the Ummah would embrace him the way that we embrace him today. Because he would literally be, where did you study? What's your ijaza? What's this? Etc. And Abu Hanifa, you know, may Allah have mercy on him as well, was a humble man in the way that he approaches. My point is, and to put it in one sentence, I am in admiration of the way the Americans have elevated their imams. You know, somebody came with me from the UK to America, and he said to me, he's a lovely guy, simple guy, mashallah, lovely brother, you know, like I play football with him and stuff. If you sat with him, he's banter, you know, like he wouldn't consider himself a scholar or anything.
Sure.
He said, Sami, you know what the funny thing is about America? I said, what? He goes, their imams, when they choose them, it's like a NBA draft, or like, you know, like football transfer market. It's like, Suhaib Webb is available. Dallas want him, California want him, New York want him. All the communities are competing to bring that imam there, offering, you know, like perks and stuff. Come to us, come to us. Yes, Al-Qadi is in Houston. Come to us, come to us. Is anyone pounding the door for Sheikh Akram or Sheikh Suhail? Or you know, a lot of these people, is anyone pounding on the door to bring them to, I don't know, Bradford, to bring them to Manchester, to bring them to Bristol, to bring them to Cardiff, to bring them to... We don't have that culture. And until I see something similar, I'm not wading into the debate of celebrity da'wah because I don't call it celebrity da'wah. I call it the elevation of the imam, the elevation of Islam as something attractive, the elevation of the status of Islam in the minds of the community, the elevation of the status of da'wah in the minds of the community, where you will have at a big convention people flying 5 hours from California to Baltimore, or 4 hours to Chicago, or flying 2 hours from New York. They'll get on a plane to go for 2-3 days to sit and hear about Islam because their favorite sheikh is there on the stage. Dilly, as a father, I hope Sulaiman inshallah has the same urge to go and sit with people of knowledge the way that I saw in America, and the way that to a lesser extent, or to a great extent, I don't necessarily see it here in the UK.
On to more pressing issues. Let's start with what's been dominating the hearts and minds and the thoughts of the Muslims for the last 18 months, and that's the ongoing genocide in Gaza. I know that it's weighed heavy on you, as it has on millions upon millions in the Muslim Ummah. And you said it's one of the things that's just been kind of with you during these travels. I put it to you squarely. What do you think the end game is?
I think that the Israelis want to take over Gaza, expel the Palestinians, and then go in and take the West Bank. They believe they have an unprecedented opportunity to do so, primarily because they believe that all of the restrictions they thought they had, international law, international order, etc., it's now become abundantly clear the extent to which the US is willing to go to ensure they don't have impunity, and the extent to which European countries are willing to go. Macron allowed Netanyahu's plane to fly over when he had to divert. He couldn't go over the Netherlands and didn't want to go over Ireland. Macron said, you know, you can go over, you know, France and the like. I think the Israelis are saying that given that there is this unprecedented opportunity, let's go for it. We've demolished Gaza. You know, we're able to move the Palestinians from place north to south, Mawasi, and then east, etc. Let's keep pushing in the hope that either we can eradicate them, which they think is an impossible task, there's too many Palestinians, or we can push them into Egypt and Jordan. then the Israelis believe that if they take Gaza and they take the West Bank, that sets them up well to expand more into Syria, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, until they can establish. You've seen they have the badge
Of course,
of this greater Israel that stretches all the way, to Khaybar and beyond, and these other places as well. I think that the Israelis now are trying to find a way to get the Palestinians out of Gaza, and they're having slight problems with that. I think one of their main problems is that Sisi refuses to open the border. Sisi, of course, is aware that if he opens the border, the Palestinians, many of them will probably go into Egypt. If they go into Sinai, it doesn't matter how much money Sisi will get. He'll probably get a lot of money for taking in the Palestinians. Sisi is worried that the Palestinians who come in will fire rockets from inside Egypt. If they fire rockets from inside Egypt, Israel is going to invade Egypt. Sisi is aware that in such a scenario, if he goes to the Americans and says to them, Israel is invading and violating the peace treaty, the Americans will say, no, there's a terrorist threat and we need an international peacekeeping force in Sinai and you need to allow the Israelis in there. When Sisi goes to the Arab League and says, guys, this is serious, Israel is invading, he'll find that the UAE and potentially another country with two holy sites have already joined the US peacekeeping force, to facilitate whatever the Israelis are taking in that way. So Sisi is keeping that border firmly shut. The issue the Israelis have is that if the Palestinians continue to stay there, there's an increasing shift in public opinion globally, which is causing them problems domestically. Companies are starting to withdraw from the Israelis. There's the whole boycott movement.
Of course.
There's the increasing, issuance of ICC arrest warrants. Some people might say they're irrelevant, but Netanyahu added 400 kilometers to his journey to the US because of the ICC arrest warrant. He's worried Netherlands might arrest him. He's worried Ireland might arrest him. He's worried. All it takes is for Ireland to see his plane and say, you need to land, emergency landing immediately, and they arrest him. It's not far-fetched anymore for them. You've got the ICJ now ruling on the issue whether they've committed genocide or not. The Israelis are concerned that the longer the war goes on, the more global public opinion is shifting, which is opening up avenues they thought could not be opened before. Then there's a third dynamic, which is that Israelis are aware that the land is stolen from the Palestinians. As a result, they're not as committed as Palestinians to preserving that land. So their threshold for casualties is not as high as the Palestinians, which means that those hostages, those small number of hostages, it's hysterical and blasphemous for them that the hostages stay in Gaza for so long. The land is not worth those hostages being killed. The longer those hostages stay there, the more Israeli public opinion puts pressure on Netanyahu. Not against the genocide. Israelis are not against the genocide. And I think there's often a confusion. They're not against the genocide. They're against genocide in which an Israeli has to pay a price.
Sure.
They're against the genocide where there are hostages. If the hostages come out, they're happy to see the genocide. They're living on stolen land already. Like they partied on the gates of the largest concentration camp. The Israelis believe that initially they had a rough time with Trump. So Trump comes to power, of course, and does the ceasefire and sends Witkoff, and the Israelis are like, what on earth is happening here? Like, this is... And not only that, according to one from, I think it was in the Times of Israel, they said that Witkoff went on a Saturday, on the Shabbat, on Sabbath, and Netanyahu said, it's the Sabbath, and Witkoff told him, Witkoff is Jewish, Witkoff told him, in very expletive language, to hell with Sabbath, you're going to sign it, you're going to sign it. I think Netanyahu then made 2 visits to the US to try to pressure people around Trump until Trump forgot all this headache, like, I don't just do what you want, like just get off my back. I'm going to focus on Ukraine and Russia and this kind of thing. I think the Israelis believe that Trump could change his mind at any time. So escalate rapidly, quickly, before he changes his mind again, because he might sit, with some Muslims and he might tell him something different. The Israeli endgame now is annexation of Gaza and normalization of ties with more Arab states, which Arab states have indicated they're willing to normalize. You've noticed UAE has not reversed normalization at all. In fact, they had an iftar with the Israeli ambassador. Morocco is expanding its ties with the Israelis in trade and the like. Bahrain has not reversed normalization of ties. Bahrain is the deposit for Saudi Arabia. It was when Bahrain decides to reverse normalization, that's when Saudi's reverse normalization.
So I was going to say that some would argue that at least on the outside, it seems like there might have been a pivot in language from Saudi with regards to Israel.
I think that the pivot in language has very little to do with any shift in position, but more to do with concern over a growing position. And I'll explain what I mean. Bin Salman is aware that his population are heavily sympathetic to the Palestinians, heavily sympathetic to Gaza, heavily sympathetic to the plight of the Palestinians that's taking place. He's well aware of it. And the Politico, when they reported the article, he said bluntly, if I normalize in this environment where you're doing the killing of the Palestinians, I'll probably be assassinated. That's how much my people love Palestine. That's how much they love Gaza. As long as you're killing them like this, I'd love to normalize. But I can't in this situation when you keep killing. Then he has another problem in that people are looking into it and they realize that between 2022 and 2023, there wasn't really any dua for Palestine being made in the Haram. Oh. 2021, you had the famous khutbah from Sudais, where instead he argued that because the Prophet Muhammad made a pact with the Jews of Medina, then the implication was there's nothing wrong with normalization. The khutbah was met with a backlash, so they toned it down a little bit. 2019, you had an Imam make a khutbah criticizing some of the reforms, and he thrown into prison straight away in that. I think what happened was the shock of Israel's attack on the Palestinians, the gravity of it. I think there was concern amongst the Saudis that if our people see us doing nothing, then we're screwed. So Sudais starts first with the dua of Allahumma have mercy on our brothers in Palestine.
Yep.
Allahumma, it started like that. Then a couple of months later, when people were really beginning to express themselves because they thought the restrictions had been lifted, Sudais in November 2023 comes out with that notorious halaqah he gave in Mecca, where he said, Ibadallah, make dua for Palestinians, but don't talk about it too much. It's a fitna. It will lead you to turn against your rulers. And he said, do not talk about things you have no right to talk about, implying about Gaza. And trust that your rulers and ulama, they'll decide what to do in Gaza. You just stick with prayer. The implication is that bin Salman was like, I'll open some room to talk about Palestine in dua, but don't go crazy and talk about it politically and the like. Then 2024, bin Salman in April 2024, of course, now Middle East Eye and Turkish diplomats and the like, there's all these videos coming out, and UK people going to Umrah. In February 2024, you remember there was that video, I think he does some comic sketches here in the UK, I can't remember, on TikTok or the like. He did a video where he said that he went to Umrah and he was stopped because of his Free Palestine merchandise.
That happened to loads of people.
A lot of people. But his one went viral.
Yes.
And then there was another Turkish man who got arrested, and then another, etc. So bin Salman is trying to, how do I keep this space limited? How do I keep it restricted to dua? How do I keep it restricted to just, Ameen and a few tears in the Haram, instead of them talking about it? So Sudais comes out in April 2024, and he makes that dua, Allahumma bless, the crown prince's ambitious vision, etc., to say to people that this dua of Palestine that I'm making is linked to Vision 2030. Like they're one and the same, guys. Stop talking about it like they're separate. They are one and the same. I think the change in rhetoric, what we've seen is, first there was a crackdown on the Free Palestine stuff. Then they lifted some of that crackdown. Now they're doing it quietly. If you have a British passport or an American passport, they're more likely to let you go. If you're Miskeen, Bengali, Algerian, Egyptian, etc., you get in serious trouble for holding it. I don't mean it in a negative way. I mean that's the category. There's a very good Netflix series called I think it's called The Goat Man.
Okay.
It caused a huge uproar in the Middle East. It's about Indian Muslims' experience when they're brought to Saudi to work and how they're treated.
What's it called? I haven't watched it. What's it called?
I think it's called The Goat Man or something like that. Something. But it's really it highlighted how they're treated in those countries. But in any case, bin Salman's problem is this. He's telling the Americans and Israelis that, guys, look, in the Haram, yes, he had to escalate. It didn't just stop on dua for Palestine. Eventually, the pressure from the public got so much, they started cursing the Zionists.
Yes,
like in very colorful language and everything and the like. At the same time, and this is the point, because sometimes you see people, they're posting saying, look, in the Haram now they're making dua against the Zionists.
You won't retweet that, Sami? You won't share that, Sami?
Then you open Al-Arabiya, which is the Saudi state TV, backed by Saudi.
Of course.
They'll say Saudi TV is a state TV. Arabiya is Saudi's channel. Like, there's no... Al-Arabiya is saying everything is the Palestinians' fault. The Palestinians are the ones who don't want peace. It's Hamas that is the one that's rejecting the ceasefire. When the whole world is saying that Israel is the one not doing peace, Al-Arabiya is saying it's the Palestinians' fault. When the Israeli planes want to go and bomb the Houthis, the Saudis are saying publicly we're not allowing them to use our airspace, and then the Israelis are posting on their accounts of the plane flying in Saudi airspace to go and bomb the Houthis. When the Ummah is saying let's go and boycott for the sake of Palestine, Turkiye al-Sheikh, the right-hand man of bin Salman, is posting 2-for-1 deals for McDonald's and going out, and you have the ulama of Saudi saying don't boycott without the permission of your ruler.
Yep.
You have, for example, the Ummah saying we need to stand in solidarity for Gaza. In America, you have those valedictorians who are coming in with the kafiyas and talking about Gaza. Not a single similar instance in Saudi Arabia at all. Everybody who's talking about Gaza gets thrown into prison. My point is, bin Salman's position is, how can I give the Muslims enough where they can shut up and stop talking about me? And how can I keep it restricted so that the Israelis believe that I'm still committed to normalization? And I think he's striking that balance very well. Because bin Salman's greatest advocates are not liberals. You'll notice, Dilly, that when bin Salman is hosting these concerts and bringing Jennifer Lopez, like he did yesterday at the time of the recording, what are we today, April 22nd? April 21st, Jennifer Lopez, a friend of mine sent me a message, said to me, I'm in Jeddah, for Formula One. I told them, inshallah, you enjoy the Jennifer Lopez concert. But in any case, Jennifer Lopez, was there. The liberals are not happy with that. The liberals are saying, oh my God, your human rights record is really bad. You're women and this,
and you shouldn't be going there. Actually.
And you shouldn't be going there. So that no matter how the concerts, raves, marijuana, reintroduction of alcohol, for diplomats according to the official statement. But in any case, and all this stuff, and still they're not happy. His biggest defenders are not liberals. His biggest defenders are Muslims, who tell you, shh, don't cause fitna. Shush, this is Wali al-Amr. Shush, bin Salman knows what he's doing. And I think this is why we see bin Salman on the religion, he's relying heavily on Islamic interpretations in order to keep the Muslims at bay and to keep the Muslims in check. Even UAE, same thing. UAE have told their imams, for example, that they're not allowed to mention Palestine, but they have to always say, Allahumma give victory to the oppressed fi kulli makan, in every place. And it's always a 10-minute khutbah, 5 minutes celebrating the rulers, and then 5 minutes, making dua for Dubai and Abu Dhabi and not casinos, I shouldn't go too far, but the reintroduction of casinos. Saudi Arabia hasn't shifted. What Saudi Arabia is doing is, it's saying to the Israelis and the Americans that, look, I want to normalize. There was a very good article, good in terms of it's very revealing. Bin Salman has a very close aide who teaches in Stanford, I think it is in California. Stanford or Berkeley, one of the two. You can find it online. And in this article, the writer describes his meetings with bin Salman, where he says that bin Salman, his vision for Saudi Arabia is one that, quote, is no longer connected to any Muslim issue. That Islamic issues no longer move the Saudi population. That it is insulated from those issues. And I think that's what we're seeing gradually, in that Al-Arabiya, the Saudi channels, are telling the Saudi population it's all the Palestinians' fault. They are to blame. They are conspiring against the Saudi. They are the ones who are against the peace. While those who are going to Umrah, they hear, it's like a radio, turn your frequency. They hear Sudais now making dua, but it doesn't go beyond that. And those who are going to Umrah, many of them are, deleting their WhatsApps before they go. Or when they go, they tell their people, don't bring the Free Palestine jumper, don't talk politics. Vision 2030 can be talked about on the minbar, Palestine cannot. And I think that's where bin Salman stands. And I think that's why the Israelis, and this is the point I finish on, I know I've gone a bit long on this.
No, it's cool.
One of the reasons why the Israelis are continuing the genocide is because the Israelis believe that although the Americans support them, there is greater support from Arab nations. That, they went into Gaza expecting the Saudis to go wild. And instead they saw Saudis partying. So they said, there's nothing going to come from Saudi. Saudi's not going to lobby for Palestine. UAE might reverse normalization. UAE said, no, Israeli ambassador, marhaba iftar. Let's talk about real peace, and the like. And I think with Sisi, same thing. It's like, just don't bring them in here, like keep them over there, etc. So the Israelis are saying this is a golden opportunity in terms of where we go. I understand that many people want to hope that Saudi has truly changed its position. But I think the moment Saudi have changed their position is when three things happen. One, when Bahrain reverses normalization, because Bahrain is considered a proxy state of Saudi. When bin Salman couldn't normalize for fear of angering the population, he kicked Bahrain into a normalization to say, this is my deposit. If Bahrain reverses normalization, bin Salman has changed. If bin Salman shuts his airspace to Israeli planes, we know the position has changed. If bin Salman stops allowing Zionists to go to Medina, I think you also posted it recently.
Yes, a vlogger.
One of the Israeli vlogger is now allowed in Medina to show,
literally at the gates of Masjid al-Nabawi.
Masjid al-Nabawi. I think that's when we know bin Salman has changed. But I think the Saudi position remains, in the words of Turkiye al-Sheikh, when he was asked, can you cancel the concerts in solidarity with Gaza? He said, why should I cancel my concerts and our bold economic vision for Gaza? No one in the world does that. Why are you asking me to do that? And I think that's the Saudi position. Let Gaza burn. Muslims are angry. Give them a bit of dua. Give them some, Sudais. Give them, alhamdulillah, Shuraim's not there. Alhamdulillah, Ya Rab, Shuraim's not there. Give them some Sudais, give them some Budair, give them some Yasser Dosari, like etc. Give them some, to keep them quiet. And I think, to be honest, I think it's working.
You think so?
I think bin Salman's tactic is working.
What, domestically?
I think
Or
internationally.
Really?
I'll tell you a funny story.
Well, it kind of does. If I'm asking you if they've pivoted on their position, then it means there is some credibility in people thinking that.
I think bin Salman's tactic is working because, and I'll give you an example. I don't want to, I'm not going to name names because I don't want to get anyone in trouble. I noticed that in some of the trips where I go and I'll be speaking, and you want to show respect for the institution. Some of them are going to Umrah in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever, and they'll be like, "Brother Sami, please, we're going to Saudi, like if you could talk about Gaza without, like mentioning the," and sometimes, so you'll be like, "I'll find a different way of going around it." And I remember a few times where there'll be a live stream of my talk, and someone in the Q&A, a young, passionate, Muslim will say, "What do we make of the Arab silence in terms of what's happening, etc.?" So you'll be like, "Look, here's what bin Salman is," and I'll hear the Imam will run from the office and quickly turn off the live stream.
That happened.
And then it happens quite often, and quickly turn off the live stream to say no, please. I remember once I was in was it Washington or I can't remember where, and the Imam, I think, wasn't told by his team that I was coming.
You won't necessarily have that in the UK.
To be honest, I haven't done much in the UK. I will be honest. I think that because the Americans, when they invited me, they invited me until
loads of masajid have speakers who are critical of Saudi.
But I do think that the reason I say with bin Salman it's working is because he's left enough plausible deniability for his supporters to say, here's the statement. Look, now in the beginning he wasn't calling it a genocide. Now he's calling it a genocide. And I think that the fear of chaos in Saudi Arabia is what makes many Muslims believe that, guys, can we focus on America instead of Saudi? Can we focus on, and you'll see it, even when you go to other Muslim countries, like forget Saudi for a second. You'll go to other Muslim countries, we won't name names, where they will be blunt. They will be like, look, we know that bin Salman is with the Israelis. We know bin Zayed is with the Israelis, but we need their money. We need their money. So we will not allow you to criticize them here. We don't want you to mention them. We know that he sold out the Palestinians, but we need the 50 billion from UAE. We need we need the money in order to preserve our own economy, and that's why we want to appease and the like. And for me as a Muslim, it makes me wonder, and I've been thinking about this recently, because Jennifer Lopez did her concert in Jeddah. Jeddah historically for pilgrims is called the Gate of Mecca because it's where the pilgrims, they all gather, and that's where they put the ihram. They put the ihram in Jeddah, and that's why Jeddah's nickname is the Gate of Mecca. And then they symbolically built a gate on the highway in recognition of Jeddah's special status in terms of its relationship to Mecca. It's not a holy city, but it's, they're called the Gate of Mecca. So one of the things that as a Muslim is I imagine sometimes, and I don't have an answer for this, I imagine Umar ibn Khattab, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, radiallahu anhu, and he is in Medina al-Munawwara and somebody runs in, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. Jennifer Lopez is strutting her stuff in Jeddah. I wonder, would somebody in the gathering of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq stand up and say, shush, quiet, ya fattan, ya khariji, shush, shush. It's not the fault of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. It's the fault of those who are attending. May Allah guide them. How dare you announce this news in front of everybody here? You should have gone to Abu Bakr's ear and you should have held it and you should have whispered in his ear. And then Abu Bakr Siddiq might say to you, and I don't want to say what Abu Bakr might, but in the modern day version, bin Salman might say, it's everybody's free to do what they want. Even if bin Salman is funding it, then it's not. I wonder how Umar al-Khattab would react to this news. I wonder how Uthman bin Affan, how Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu ta'ala. I wonder how Muawiyah and these others would react to this news. I wonder how Khalid ibn Walid would react. And I think those who shout loudest about them are not reacting the way they would react. Those who shout loudest about, we are people who are preserving the essence and tradition of the deen, I don't think they necessarily are. And what breaks my heart is that you see in Saudi Arabia now, in Al-Ula, for example, bikinis wandering around and the like, things that, that any Muslim would not accept in the land of the holy mosques. But the interpretation of the scholars who are speaking to Muslims like me, and who when we say, Ya alim, ya scholar, Give me guidance. Asim Qurayshi, may Allah bless him and bless that wonderful hand with which he writes with and the tongue with which he speaks, wrote a wonderful letter to the ulama where he said, you are the inheritors of the deen. The community goes to you for guidance. Tell me what to do in this situation. And the alim tells him, it's not my business, so I'm not qualified, do shush and don't cause fitna. And that's why I think that the tragedy of Gaza is not America. I expect America to react the way it's reacting. I expected it. Did you expect anything different?
Of course not.
I expect Starmer to give immunity to Netanyahu. Did you expect anything different?
No, not at all.
I expect Macron to let Netanyahu. Did you expect? I'm from my mother's from Algeria. Macron is not doing anything we did not expect him to do. A man who still celebrates colonization. I'm not surprised. The tragedy of Gaza is the spectacular betrayal of the Muslim rulers of Gaza. It's the spectacular betrayal whereby they cannot even lobby America for Gaza. Instead, and I'm going to get in trouble for this, I'm going to get a text message soon, the fact that Hakan Fidan, the Turkish foreign minister, can go to Marco Rubio, who said bomb them all, and when he meets, the video shows the meeting, they hug each other so tightly. Why? Because he wants something from him on Syria. The tragedy is that you see Mohammed bin Salman, where he cannot even make a speech with regards to Gaza, except to give one or two lines, you know, we want the 1967 borders. The tragedy is Anwar Ibrahim can on the one hand say, you know, Gaza and Palestine and the like, and then go to BlackRock and Boeing and say, you know, China won't buy your planes, we'll buy them instead. The tragedy is that Macron, and I promise I won't go on too long about this, Macron, when Trump announced the tariffs on Europe, told them I'm announcing tariffs. Macron had an emergency meeting with the biggest French companies that have large investments or are planning large investments in America. Do you know what he said to them, Dilly? Mm-hmm. He said to them, I forbid you from investing further in the US because what message does it send when we are under attack and you are investing in the person who is attacking us? That's Izzah. You know, mon ami, you know, to be honest, honnêtement, c'est Izzah. It is Izzah. Gaza is being burned. Erdogan is saying, do I want F-15s or F-35s? And he's asking Trump, can I shift some money from the F-15s that I bought and buy the F-35s instead, or vice versa? Bin Salman says, yeah, Trump, I won't give you 500 billion. I will give you 1 trillion, Habib. UAE sends Tahnoon bin Zayed 3 weeks ago to say, I will give you 26 billion. You're perfectly right in your economic policies in terms of what it is that you want to achieve. When you look at it, Gaza, if you're Muslim and you're looking, the West is not doing anything. I was in Germany last week or 2 weeks ago. I've been away from my family for a while. So I said to my wife, I said, Sumaya, I know the baby is still young and I can't take you by plane because, you know, I will take you to Sarajevo by land because she loves Sarajevo. So I went Cologne, Munich, Bergstadion, and then Klagenfurt, Zagreb, and then Sarajevo. When we got to Munich, Sumaya said to me, Salma said to me, I want to go to a castle called Neuschwanstein. Neuschwanstein, I don't know if you remember the Disney films when we were younger.
Yes.
When it opens, that castle is Neuschwanstein. Walt Disney took that castle and he made it his logo.
The iconic Disney castle.
Exactly. We enter Neuschwanstein castle. You have to walk up a mountain, walk up a hill. When you go to Ludwig's throne room, so Ludwig is 18-year-old, becomes king, gets defeated in 20 years of age by Bismarck, who unites Germany, and then is basically like a puppet king until he eventually gets removed from his position later. You enter his throne room, Dilly. Of course, I'm looking up, okay, you see architecture, medieval, Germanic castle, whatever it is, etc. You enter the throne room, the tour guide's talking, and this is this, and this is Jesus on the top, and this is whatever. And then you look at the massive picture that he has, Ludwig built or drew, on the left wall of his throne room. It's a big battle. You know, chainmail, armor, and whatever. I'm looking at the picture, and I see that everybody on the floor looks like us. And I'm looking further, and you see that they're wearing turbans. And then on the floor in the picture, as in the pictures, it's a battle, but on the floor is the flag of Islam. It's all the moon and the star flag. Ludwig never went to the Muslim world, never entered battle with the Muslims, got bullied by his own people, by Bismarck of Germany. And in his mind, his dream, his greatest imagination of great victory was to have Islam under his feet. I don't expect the West to act any differently from how it's acting right now. We always knew their hypocrisy.
Agreed.
Algerians, they all know the hypocrisy. I did not expect that there could be a genocide of this gravity And instead you have Erdogan, bin Salman and bin Zayed and all these others and Anwar and etc. Some people got upset I included Anwar. But even like Qatar, for example, Netanyahu gave the speech. He told the Israelis, guys, Qatar is not an enemy. It's not an enemy. Qatar is a very, very good friend to us in terms of what we're doing. That's the tragedy of what's happening in Gaza. And that's why I think Israel's, when they say they increased the genocide or the intensity because of Trump, it's not because of Trump. They increased it because they thought when Trump did the ceasefire, the Muslim states would finally take a stand. When they didn't, Israel said, bombs away, like, we can bully Sisi into doing so. And I promise this is the final point. Sisi, when he did the emergency Arab League meeting, Sisi thought that I'm being bullied here by the Israelis and the Americans. I gave everything to the Israelis. The Israelis were arguing between themselves. Yair Lapid was coming out and saying, Netanyahu, Sisi is our friend. Sisi's helped us in everything. Sisi helped us blockade Gaza, helped us with information. He snitched on them whenever they wanted to attack us. Everything. Sisi's our friend. If you keep pushing him like this, his regime might fall. Netanyahu's like, Tuz, he's my puppet. I do with him whatever I want. So Sisi decides to say to Netanyahu, if you're going to push me in a corner, I'm going to go to my Arab brethren. I'm going to take a stand. So he calls the Emergency Arab League meeting in February this year.
Yes.
In the original script, King Abdullah first goes to Trump to neutralize Trump.
But wasn't that gathering centered around finding an alternative to Trump's estate plans for?
So King Abdullah goes to Washington first to try to temper Trump, because the view of Trump generally is Trump's position is always based on the last person he talked to.
Because he shared the AI video that went viral.
Exactly. He met Netanyahu, shared the AI video, said I want to build a Riviera. He met King Abdullah the next day and said it was just an idea. It was just a suggestion. I want to see what everybody else does. Trump's policy, Mu'in Rabbani, has a wonderful phrase. Trump's position is always based on the last person that he's spoken to. Biden was an ideologue. Biden, there's a good interview with one of the Palestinians who met Biden. I think Sheikh Omar interviewed him or someone. And the Palestinian said, when we showed Biden the images, he just said, I've seen the images. Like, couldn't care less. Biden was an ideologue. Trump doesn't give it. Trump's a businessman. So King Abdullah goes on the basis that, and he tells Trump, he says to Trump, listen, I'm an ally of yours and an ally of the Israelis. But even I can't hold my people back. If you push this Riviera idea, our regime will fall, so will Sisi's regime fall, and then you have to deal with jihadists. Yeah, Trump, relax, man. And Trump was like, yeah, you know what? And he comes out and he goes, it was just an idea. Anyway,
Good.
Sisi calls the Arab League summit in this climate. So Trump now is backing off a little bit. Sisi writes in the statement that we, the Arab nations, categorically reject any displacement of the Palestinians. Then reports emerge that bin Zayed is angry of the UAE, and bin Zayed is threatening not to attend, because bin Zayed says, don't categorically dismiss displacement. Don't write we categorically reject the displacement.
There was a word that they wanted included.
Right, we reject the forced displacement of the Palestinians. Which is what Trump was saying. Trump saying, I'm not going to force them, they're going to leave on their own. So Sisi says, hell no, I'm not changing the statement. So bin Zayed doesn't attend. Bin Salman doesn't attend. The only main rulers who attend is Ahmed al-Sharaa and Sisi and the King Abdullah of Jordan. Tebboune gets so angry of Algeria. Tebboune of Algeria gets so angry at bin Zayed. He's like, this Arab League meeting has failed. What's the point? If they can't even agree on this statement, I'm not going to grace this meeting with my presence. And he decides not to attend. I think Qais Said as well doesn't attend either, of Tunisia, who loves to take every opportunity. If you're the Israelis, Dilly,
you're loving this.
If me and you are sitting like Hasha, la qaddar Allah, with Netanyahu,
You're loving this.
and Netanyahu is saying, I'm worried, what will the Arabs do? You're like, what do you have to worry about? What do you have to fear? Even now in Syria, for example, and I know you said we'll talk about it later, but they're in Azerbaijan, the Israeli delegation, Turkish delegation, to iron out a de-conflict zone.
De-conflict zone in Syria.
There's no Syrian representative in that delegation that's taking place in Azerbaijan and the like. And that's why I think that the tragedy of Gaza is the betrayal of the Muslim rulers. And I would even go far as to suggest that everybody who defends bin Salman and bin Zayed is complicit in this betrayal as well, because they are trying to prevent an environment where ordinary Muslims can pressure the ruler into taking a stance. I'm not saying bring down bin Salman or bin Zayed. I'm saying, yeah, bin Zayed, fear Allah and reverse normalization. I couldn't care less who rules UAE. Just reverse normalization. If he does it tomorrow, we'll tell him, mashallah, well done, bin Zayed. I'm not saying go and topple bin Salman. I'm saying, yeah, bin Salman, ittaqillah, fear Allah. Reverse normalization. Tell the Bahrainis to reverse normalization. I'm not saying Erdogan should be replaced. I'm saying, yeah, Erdogan, cut the trade for goodness sakes. Like, cut the trade with the Israel. Yeah, he bully them with the pipeline, the oil pipeline that goes from Azerbaijan to Israel. Use it, turn it off. You're too valuable to the Europeans for them to bully you. You're fully in control of Turkey now. The Kemalists don't have a leg to stand on. Imam Oglu's gone now. Like, you've basically got rid of him in dubious circumstances. But you're the Sultan now of Turkey. Do something. No one's saying bring down these rulers. People are saying rulers, stand up to the cause. Stand up and do something. Stand up and do something that is right and just. Stop being puppets of Israel. Stop being people who Israel are walking all over. And I think that's why those who are saying don't criticize the rulers, in my opinion, and this is truly what I think.
No, but they'll say that you criticizing the rulers whilst caveating by saying we're not asking for them to be taken down. Then if they're not doing reversing normalization, then one can naturally conclude then if you don't take them down, then what?
I think, in my opinion, I think that there are tangible things that these rulers can do that don't require going to war with the Israelis.
There's tangible things they can do that won't require firing a single bullet.
Exactly. Whether it's in 2014 or 2013, I could have the year wrong, the French Parliament passed a law recognizing the Armenian genocide. Erdogan immediately withdrew the Turkish ambassador and suspended the French ambassador over that.
Serious issue for him.
In France, one of the French television, they did a documentary about the Algerian army, criticizing Algerian army. Algeria withdrew the ambassador. When the Canadian ambassador to Saudi Arabia criticized the human rights record, bin Salman, not only did he kick out the Canadian ambassador, he suspended trade ties with the Canadians. Canadians 8 months later came back begging bin Salman, apologizing to him, and then restoring ties. Biden said, I'm going to make Saudi Arabia a pariah state. Bin Salman bullied him with the oil and gas until Biden came to Jeddah and begged bin Salman for a reset. The UAE, when a Lebanese media minister, George Qardahi, when he came out and criticized the UAE's role in Yemen, UAE suspended trade ties with Lebanon and withdrew the ambassador. So they have diplomatic means by which to adopt. They choose not to do so for Gaza or to do so for Palestine. They have the ability to do so. The reason why I'm not talking too much about regime change is because, in my opinion,
it's not necessarily regime change. It's a case that if you don't want them to be taken down and you don't want an armed insurrection or a civil war or an armed revolution, then what is the solution? What's the counter to? Well, they're not going to reverse normalization. They're not going to expel ambassadors and recall theirs from those respective lands. The natural conclusion, one would say, even though you're not calling for it, Sami, is that the frustration will build up and it could lead there.
Well, let's look at Saudi for a second. Dua for Palestine disappeared from the Haram and then came back. And dua against the Zionists came back. What made bin Salman change his mind? The fear that the people might do something, indicating that enough public pressure does lead to a change in policy, and that if you follow that momentum, you can force greater change in terms of what's happening in Saudi. So the issue is less to do with, oh, nothing will happen, and more to do with those who should be putting the pressure are not putting the pressure.
It may have a change in rhetoric, not necessarily policy.
But if you did enough to change the rhetoric, and you did enough to delay normalization. Bin Salman was about to normalize. He told Fox News,
he was ready.
It day by day. The people who delayed it is the anger of the Ummah, is the anger of Saudis, is the anger of those Muslims who are going to Umrah and going to Hajj, who are openly starting to talk about Palestine. And he panicked and said, okay, if I can't shut them up, let me channel it into a dua directly, a lovely, Sudais voice and the like, and even though I can't listen to much anymore, a lovely, Yasser Dosari, made a mistake in an ayah and produced a wonderful melody of the ayah, like afterwards and the like. I think that if you keep putting the pressure, bin Salman, and put him in a position whereby he has to choose, he will choose to reverse ties with the Israelis. He will. The problem is that the Saudis are not putting enough pressure. Historically, the Bedouins used to put pressure on that ruling family. Muhammad Asad in his book wrote to Mecca in the beginning. He has a passage in the start. He says, the Saudi I talk about no longer exists. The flow of gold and wealth into the kingdom has softened the Bedouins, whereby they no longer take the drastic action that they used to take in order to preserve the identity of the kingdom. The issue is that it's a responsibility of the Saudis as well to pressure their government in order to do so. UAE, same thing. Issues related to boycott, for example. Many Saudis, they're not boycotting. Many of them, they're not. Because they say that in Saudi, it's not my business. Boycott won't make an impact. And the government is trying to help to push those companies that are being boycotted elsewhere to make more profit in Saudi Arabia itself. The reason why I mention all of this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask you on the Day of Judgment for what you did with the powers that He gave you. You have the ability to speak. You have the ability to protest. You have the ability to boycott. What prevents you is because you fear a consequence that will affect you. So what you're essentially saying is, Allahumma, this consequence that might happen to me, give me a comfortable way to do it, otherwise there's no point doing it. And that's why the seerah is such a terrifying reference point for anybody who wants to do haqq or wants to do that which is good. Because the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when he goes to give da'wah, he doesn't do it in a comfortable way, because no comfortable way is afforded to him. He goes to Taif, they stone him. He goes to leaders of Quraysh, they abuse him. He goes to Umar al-Khattab, he swears he's going to kill him. He goes to, all these others in the Mecca, and instead they decide to boycott him and persecute him instead. The seerah is terrifying because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam met with these consequences when he did what's right, so there's no escape for you with regards to these consequences as well. And that's why Ibn Khaldun in his book, when he talks about nations, he says the collapse of a nation doesn't just happen because of the oppression of the ruler. It happens based on the extent to which the people allow that oppression to happen. He said that a state's life is dictated based on a balance of how far the ruler overreaches versus how far the people prevent him from overreaching. If the people allow him to keep overreaching, people and ruler are condemned. That's Ibn Khaldun what he says. The people and the ruler are condemned. And this is what I meant. We were talking about this off air earlier. And this is why, in my opinion, we were talking earlier off air about why some scholars are not as bold in terms of calling out what's happening with the Muslim rulers. And I said to you something along the lines of that the way that we raise many scholars today is, it's that wudu, zakat, we tell the stories but we don't implement them of how Sahaba acted in the past, and they managed to go through life without that fitna ever coming to their doorstep. Bin Salman brought that fitna now to their doorstep, and suddenly the scholars are like, what do I do? These were supposed to be stories, like these are just things that we told in the halaqah. These are like I talked about Ahmed bin Salman, about how he's put into prison and he tells the prison guard, you are also complicit in the dhulm against me. It was a lovely story, it made people cry, but wait a minute, I don't want to be Ahmed ibn Hanbal. Like, I told the story of Imam Malik, the ruler told him, give me a fatwa, to against the rebels, your divorce fatwa is being used by the rebels against me, take back the fatwa. And Imam Malik said no. And they beat him and he said no. And they broke his arms and they said no, which is why some people claim, I don't know if the story is true, that's why some Malikis, this was supposed to be a story to make people go, MashaAllah, I don't want to be Imam Malik. Like what's going on here? Like, Imam al-Shafi'i goes and rebukes Harun al-Rashid, the Khalifa. I don't rebuke Harun al-Rashid. Instead, I make dua for Vision 2030 so that he can leave me alone. I make dua that Allah blesses the vision of our beloved Crown Prince The problem is that the scholars, in modern day, the way we raise many of them is that the scholar lives comfortably and gives us reference points, but doesn't lead. And now the scholars are being asked by the community, are you going to lead? And the scholars are saying, the role of a scholar is not to lead. And that's the dilemma that these scholars have in Saudi Arabia. It's that now, suddenly, the duty is to call on bin Salman and denounce the haram that he's doing. And instead, the scholars are saying, if I'm going to be like Salman al-Uda and these guys in prison, whoa, Allahumma, if I stay out of prison, I can do more khair. If I stay and talk about wudu, I can do more khair. If I stay out and talk about, I can do more khair for this ummah. Allahumma, my pact with you is I'm going to do more khair rather than take my duty as a scholar and lead the ummah moving forward. That's the tragedy. That's what allows genocide. That's Israel's greatest ally. That's Israel's greatest advantage over the Palestinians. And that's why I think that at the end of the day...
But we've also had ulama, mashayikh, openly now quite unequivocally calling for jihad fi sabilillah, the responsibility of the Muslim armies from Pakistan to Libya to Indonesia.
Take Pakistan, for example.
Yeah.
You gave a fatwa for jihad for Palestine. Why didn't you give a fatwa for Imran Khan to have a fair trial? When you saw how the nation was in turmoil and how Imran Khan, forget that whether he's guilty or not, why didn't you...
It's a bit too close to home, that.
The reason why... but this is the point. You made that fatwa because it was easy, because you knew there'd be no responsibility for it. No one's going to move. No one's going to hold you to account. No one's going to hold you responsible for it. Nothing is going to happen. And you can go to the public and say, at least I gave a fatwa. Bye guys. Like, I'm gone. That's my issue with that fatwa. My issue with the fatwa is not that I don't think it's right or the like. My issue with the fatwa is I think it's a haqqun urida bihi batil. It's something that is right, that was done for a wrong reason. It was done knowing Asim Munir wouldn't move. It's like the big protest that came out in Bangladesh and came out in Pakistan for Gaza. May Allah bless our beloved Ummah in Pakistan and Bangladesh that love Palestine and love Gaza so much that they are willing to come out for it. My question is, why don't you come out for the justice in your own country that will liberate the army to be able to actually do something with regards to Palestine? Why is it that when you go to Pakistanis and you talk, they will have a controversial opinion on Imran Khan? Yeah, but you know Imran Khan came to power with the work of the army. Yeah, but you know, you're like, okay, brother, is he in prison for that? Is he in prison for any of the reasons that you are bringing now?
No.
He's not. He's in prison. Why? The army feared that they couldn't control him. The army feared he was popular. The army feared he might win an election, and therefore he should go to prison. The army attacked you through Imran Khan. They wanted to press Imran Khan. Now that's something close to home. You talk about justice. Don't tell me about justice just far away. What about here in your own land? You know, liberating your own land from dhulm. And this is why I think that this is when people talk about the age of Dajjal. I don't think the age of Dajjal is a man actually turns up with an eye. It's possible. As in, it might be what happens. A man turns up with kafara on his head with one eye. But could it also be that we learn Islam now with one eye? Whereby we only do that which makes us feel comfortable, but not that which Allah has prescribed for us, which is to be people of justice, to go out and protest and demand and the like and whatnot. You know, the same day that the Pakistanis did the protest for Gaza, Asim Munir was meeting with American Congress people to try and cement, further deals in order to become a greater, like a supporter of US foreign policy. What I meant was, it's like Asim Munir played a game of bread and circus. He told them, bring them a lovely sheikh with a lovely dua, with a lovely, we are with you Palestine, we are with you. As an Asim Munir went, mashallah, tabarakallah.
Not the bread.
Not the bread. And then when they go to Asim and tell him we want justice, Asim Munir is ready to hit the Pakistani people. He's ready to shoot at them and ready to, rig the elections and things like. He's ready to do all of it. And that's my point in that, is the age of Dajjal that a man comes with one eye, or is the age of Dajjal whereby we're like, Gaza, 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 but we ignore the dhulm that's taking place at home. And the reason why I mentioned Imran Khan here is because he is the greatest example of how you have a regime that has thrown somebody into prison for no other reason than that he's a serious challenger to them. But the practicing Muslim says, yeah, but Imran Khan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَلَا يَجْرِمَنَّكُمْ شَنَآنُ قَوْمٍ عَلَىٰ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا. Do not let your hatred of someone lead you to injustice. The correct position of a Muslim is give him a fair trial.
Of course.
He shouldn't be in prison. But because of something, I don't know how to describe this disease, he cannot set aside his hatred for Imran Khan for the sake of justice. Let injustice be done because I don't like the guy. Let him be oppressed because I don't like the guy. He's not worth my striving for his haqq because I don't like him. And this is what I mean by you go to the masjid in Taraweeh. ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على ألا تعدلوا اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى. And people weep, Allah, the justice in the Quran, Allah, what Allah has ordered us to do. Then he goes to try wallah after the salah and he tells you that Imran Khan is not worth my... The ayah went here and got stuck in this eye. It didn't manage to go to... It didn't open the other eye instead. And that's what I mean when I say that there is a sheikh, and this is the story I finish on. There is a sheikh in New Jersey, very, very good friend, one of my most beloved companions across this whole journey that I've been on. His name is So Sheikh and I were in the car, so I don't offend his followers. Sheikh and I are in the car, and he says to me, Sami, what is the hardest part? You asked me earlier about the traveling, and I ducked your question and went and focused on something else instead. He said, Sami, what's the hardest part of all this traveling that you're doing? I told him, Sheikh, do you want the truth? He said, yeah. I told him, the hardest challenge I have found is trying to convince my community to do what's right. And the heavy price they might pay for it later is worth paying. Is convincing them that what's going to come next might be worse. But doing what's right is worth that situation getting worse. That this status quo is worth just appending and seeing what opportunities come later. And he says to me, but you know, Sami, because in many ways Islam has become problematic for many Muslims. I told him, Shaykh, taqillah fir Allah, how can you say Islam has become problematic? He said, Salli al Nabi, send blessings on the Prophet. He said, think about it. He said, when we talk to our communities today, and you will resonate with this deeply because you have this challenge as well when you talk to communities. He said, how do we describe the successful Muslim today? I said, I don't know what you mean. He goes, we tell them that study hard, go to a top uni, so you can get a good job with a very high paying salary, so you can buy a house and you can buy a nice car, and alhamdulillah, you will have succeeded in life. When we want to show Muslims what success looks like, we take them to the richest area where Muslims live, and we say, look at these rich Muslims where they live there, be like that doctor in the hospital, be like that lawyer, be like such. I told him, Sheikh, there's nothing wrong with going after dunya, because Allah says, dunya and akhirah, they go hand in hand. He said, I'm not saying there's a problem with it. Now measure Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam by the criteria we now taught our community. And I cringed. I told him, why have you gone quiet? I told him, Sheikh, I can't. He goes, the reason your wires are going haywire is because you're realizing the criteria of success is not what we're teaching the community. And this is the problem that we have this is why Islam has become problematic. Because the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his greatness was not in what he achieved or gained in the dunya. It was his perseverance in a consistent struggle that did not end until his dying breath. Even when he conquers Mecca, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he dies 1 year later. He doesn't even, enjoy the fruits of his endeavors. If we talk about it in modern parlance, in modern standards, he doesn't end up in a castle. He doesn't enter Rome. He doesn't enter Persia. He doesn't conquer lands like Genghis Khan or King Alexander. So the greatest of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not the billions. Elon Musk is richer than the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in terms of money and material and the like. So what made Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam the greatest man acknowledged by Muslims and non-Muslims alike? It was a state of being, the capacity for struggle, the perseverance in struggle. And he says this is why Islam for many has become problematic, because Islam is teaching you that the path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the path to justice is paved with struggle, and comfort doesn't come often on that path. Whereas we're doing the opposite, that the smart one is the one who can come up with a path with the least struggle but the most comfort. So Sami, when you look at Gaza and you're trying to tell the community to move and do what's right, even though you can't promise comfort, don't blame Islam. It's nothing to do with Islam. It is the community that was raised with one eye. I think that there's a paraphrasing of what he said, but I think there is something logical about that, because now you see Trump continuing the genocide too. And you see many people saying maybe we should have left Biden in power instead, as if they forgot everything that Biden did with regards to the genocide. But I think the question is not Trump or Biden. The question is, Dilly, I'm comfortable, man. Like, why are you telling me to sacrifice so much for these causes that I have no direct link to? Why are you telling me to sacrifice for whether it's Imran Khan, whether it's, these other, Sudan, whether it's, I don't know much about Sudan, it's got nothing to do with me. Imran Khan, so that's a political beef between them, it's nothing to do with me. Rohingya, I don't even know where they are on a map, like I don't know their history. I need to learn their history worth before they're worth my time. Uyghurs, I need to learn their history worth before they're worth my time, kind of thing. And I think the duty Islam imposes on a Muslim, Gaza is making us feel it, Dilly. Like, it's making us feel the burden. I don't think Gaza is breaking people's hearts because of the genocide itself, although it breaks people's hearts. It's breaking people's hearts because now you're realizing you have to do something about it. You're not sure what to do. You're not sure what the way to. You just know you have to do something, and you're realizing the more you do, it's not producing the results that you want. And now you're realizing the path of da'wah is exactly like this. It's like Nuh alayhi salam, 900 years, and you realize 900 years, he doesn't convince the majority of his people. Lut alayhi salam, in some reports, doesn't convince a single person to become Muslim. Even his own wife betrays him. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, 13 years in Mecca, he doesn't manage. We're talking 18 months. He did 13 years in Mecca. And that's the tough part for those in Saudi, for those in UAE. How do I give da'wah now when the government is willing to throw me in prison if I say La ilaha illallah and Palestine should be free? If I say La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah, the Quran is haqq, the Quran enjoins justice, I need to stand for Palestine. How do I do it in modern day when I'm living so comfortably? And I think that's the tragedy. Gaza is betrayed by the Muslim world before it's betrayed by the West.
Brothers and sisters and friends, I see that you're enjoying the content. How come you've not clicked subscribe to the 5 Pillars YouTube channel? And if you're watching via Rumble, how come you've not subscribed on our Rumble channel? If you like the content, you like the guests, you like what we're talking about, it's absolutely inexcusable and cheeky for you not to click subscribe. Thank you and Jazakallah khair. Why is there a disproportionate focus on Saudi and the UAE? Your critics would say that. Why is there a disproportionate focus? We can understand why the land of the two holy mosques, but the issues that you've raised, the inaction, the suffocation, the censorship, it's not limited just to Saudi Arabia and the UAE.
I've been asked this before, and I don't understand the question. I'll explain why.
But nearly every conversation or question we have up until this point, we've been filming for half an hour, 40 minutes, nearly always circles back to Saudi or
No,
the
I
UAE.
agree. But the thing is, anybody who's followed my work for the last 10 years will know that Saudi barely makes 15% of the stuff that I talk about, or even 10% of the stuff that I talk about. I think it's more the Saudi stuff goes more viral than the other stuff.
There's truth to this.
And the reason, and that's the point I want to make here. It's that the reason I don't reply to many comments online is because the premise of the question is always false. You only talk about Saudi. If you're not willing to take the time to see my work and realize that Saudis barely makes 10% of what I say, you didn't make the effort for me out of respect. I don't make the effort with you, you know. I shouldn't show you the same respect to respond to you. That's why people some say he never responds online. Because the premise of all the critics that come, they're false premises. You'll go to, the reason why Turkiye doesn't invite me to many conferences is because they are very angry at stuff I say about Erdogan. You go to these other different countries.
How about Qatar?
Qataris, the same thing. Qataris are like, you know, Al Jazeera haven't been on since 2021. They're like, this guy doesn't come on Al Jazeera. Like, absolutely not. Because they imprisoned some lawyer, you know, Miskeen, who they changed election law, and they imprisoned him when he got upset, his vote got taken away. They wanted to press the West with the World Cup, and then they ruled that he's life in prison. And they got upset with some criticism. May Allah guide the hearts and stuff like that. But that's the first thing. So the reason I want to push back on this is because it's categorically not true. The second thing is, why we mention them here today is because, in my opinion, Saudi single-handedly has the power to end the genocide tomorrow.
How?
Saudi single-handedly.
How?
Saudi withdraws the ambassador from Washington. Saudi kicks out US ambassador from Saudi Arabia. Saudi orders Bahrain to reverse normalization of ties and bullies UAE to reverse normalization. Immediately, Israel ends the genocide. I believe that wholeheartedly. Israel ends the genocide. Saudi shuts the Saudi airspace. Saudi stops Israelis from visiting the kingdom on Israeli passports. Saudi does a full-on reversal of normalization with the Israelis. I think Netanyahu and the Israelis panic so much, they send an American official to Saudi Arabia to beg bin Salman to stop reversal of normalization, and he tells them, stop the genocide, and I might consider it. They stop the genocide tomorrow. Bluntly. The reason why we focus on Saudi Arabia is, Saudi is the one at... Let's take Turkey and Saudi as an example. If Erdogan tomorrow goes to war with the Israelis or attacks an Israeli position... Militarily. Let's go through the scenarios. America sanctions Turkey. The Turkish lira drops even further. Economic crisis. Bayraktars and the others, they have the means to be able to put up a decent, you know, the navy and everything that they've built and everything like that. What happens within a week is huge protests break out in Turkey by Turks against Erdogan. Ya Jahil, how dare you compromise Turkey, the state, for the sake of Palestine? It's an Arab issue. 51% maybe, they're still with Erdogan in their hearts, but 51% won't take to the streets. Those secular Kemalists, they take to the streets.
Yeah.
Then some Muslim supporters of Erdogan, they think we should be wiser. You know, we shouldn't really go in a confrontation. Erdogan is wrong here. We need to save Turkey first, so we need to get rid of Erdogan as well. So now you've got 65% population on the street against Erdogan, angry that he took a stance for Palestine. Because Erdogan is at war with Ataturk's legacy first and foremost. The Turks will say, Sen ben yok Türkiye var. Me and you know Turkey is everything. Not Sen ben yok Ummet Muhammad var. Erdogan now is in a position whereby it's not the Israelis who are threatening him, it's the Turks saying, if you don't have a way to fight Palestine, in which we are economically prosperous, don't even make an effort to do so. We're not willing to struggle for it. That's the reality of Erdogan's position, which is why people are easier on Erdogan than they are on bin Salman, who has a completely different situation.
Which is?
Bin Salman announces that he's reversing normalization, kicks out the American ambassador, comes out like King Faisal. Ikhwani, ماذا ننتظر? Brothers, what are we waiting for? Gaza tunadina, al-Quds tunadina. We're going to take a position. America sanctions Saudi Arabia. The reaction of Saudis is not the same as Kemalists. The reaction of Saudis is, هذا السعودي فوق. We're taking a stance. Palestine تستاهل, Palestine deserves it. yeah, bin Salman, don't worry about the economy. We're going to tie our stomachs the way that Umar al-Khattab tied his stomach. And they're like, yeah, bin Salman, go. We are with you. Didn't King Faisal say that we're ready to go back to our dates and our milk? Yeah, bin Salman, go. Nahnu ma'ak. We are with you. Whoever says he's not, they will discipline them. It won't be like the Kemalists being left on the streets in Istanbul. Saudis will hit other Saudis and tell them, istahi ala nafsik. This is for Palestine. Shush and be quiet. We're standing all together. Saudi's in a different position. Bin Salman becomes a king suddenly. Bin Salman is backed by his people, even in economic hardship, if he chooses to do what's right for Gaza. In fact, if Bin Salman does so and UAE conspires against him, Saudis will go with Bin Salman to go and take over the UAE to make sure it can't be a thorn in the side. Then suddenly the Saudi... Bin Salman is in a position unlike Erdogan. Bin Salman is fighting the pro-Palestinian sentiment in Saudi society, while Erdogan is fighting the pro-secular Kemalist tendency in society. They don't have the same situation. In fact, you should actually swap the leaders. If you put Erdogan in Saudi situation, then you'd be like, Erdogan, really? You've got everything to do something that is much more different. I'm not insulting the Turks here. I specified Kemalists here. Why? Because all the elections show there's still 49% or
Still half and
give
half.
and take.
Yeah.
And there are those amongst Erdogan's supporters who genuinely believe Erdogan should do nothing for Palestine, that Turkey is... They support Erdogan because of his Turkey first policy. So Erdogan's social base is not the same as Bin Salman's base. So when you say, why do you put something greater on Bin Salman than you do on Erdogan? It's because they're not in the same position. I'm not saying Erdogan can't do anything. Erdogan should be doing something and he deserves to be criticized. And anybody who listens to the stuff I say will know Erdogan gets the same amount of attention as Saudi Arabia gets, if not more, which is why I get messages from time to time from... I remember once, I probably shouldn't say this publicly, they tried to get me off a panel once for a joint Bosnia event. They said this guy criticized Erdogan, we don't want him on the Bosnia event. I was lucky the Bosnian said he's an honorary Bosnian. You know, like he stays on that particular panel. But the reason why I say this is that if you have a problem with your pipe, you blame the plumber if he doesn't come and fix it. You don't blame the electrician. If you got a problem with electricity, I don't blame the plumber, I blame the electrician. You blame the person who has the power to be able to do something. I haven't mentioned Ahmed al-Sharaa once in terms of his responsibility towards Palestine. I don't expect anything of him. I don't expect any... With Sisi, I criticize him. Sisi could send tanks tomorrow into Gaza just to deliver aid.
What can Qatar be doing?
I think that the Qataris... I just went to Doha in November. And, just to like help to make a peace and like not so that, you know, I could get... you know, like sometimes you shouldn't keep too many fronts open. Astaghfirullah. But I remember that...
Can they stop the genocide? Do you think?
There is a report. Sisi in the Arab League, he had the plan in which he said that I have a new reconstruction plan for Gaza. Trump liked it a lot. Witkoff liked it a lot. It was a plan in which Sisi said, let me handle Gaza. I'll establish a new police force that will prevent Hamas from... but there needs to be a ceasefire and we will rebuild Gaza. Just get out. Because Sisi's bad. So Witkoff liked the plan and Trump liked the plan. Witkoff, Times of Israel, reported that Netanyahu was furious with the plan. Categorically rejected it. And he was more furious that Witkoff liked it and more furious that Trump liked it. Because they thought, okay, this is actually like a decent plan. Then reports emerged during Netanyahu's Qatargate scandal. He's in trouble now because Qatari money was used to lobby, etc. Amongst the things that the Qataris allegedly asked Netanyahu was to make sure Trump doesn't accept Sisi's plan. Amongst the things, why? They were worried that Sisi would become the point man for Palestine. And they wanted to be the point. Just think about that for a second. The suggestion is, according to the reports, is Qatar prefers the genocide to continue as long as it's the point person. If it means...
And not Egypt.
And not Egypt. My issue with Qatar is that it was the first country to willingly normalize outside of a peace treaty. Egypt and Jordan, they normalized, but you don't see Israelis in Jordan and Egypt because it's pretty clear it was a military peace treaty that was made. The Egyptians realized Cairo might fall and Sinai might fall and they signed the peace treaty fine. The Qataris willingly normalized. Ahmed bin Salman, the former Qatari Prime Minister 2018, said, my dream is to see Israelis in Riyadh, Abu Dhabi and Doha. The Qataris were the first, they told the Americans, we'll give you the largest military base and normalize if you get the Saudis off our back and recognize our coup that we've done here in Doha. The Qataris are the pioneers of normalization in this regard. I don't know how that squares with the... It's true that Al Jazeera has done phenomenal work in terms of keeping that alive. But then you hear the stories of what's happening in their relationship with Netanyahu and Qatargate, etc. I am not sure if Qatar is necessarily the ally that everybody thinks that it is. And that's why I think that a lot of the woes of Palestine, they can be resolved if the rulers take a different position. What baffles me is the reluctance of people to push those rulers to take that position. And when you ask them, why don't you take the position? He tells you, I want to go to Umrah. I wonder, Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he's giving his da'wah from Medina. And he wants to go and do Umrah in Mecca, and they prevent him from doing so. Would you have, not you, but would you have been in the jalsa of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and said to me, Ya Rasulullah, let's tone down our da'wah so we can go do Umrah?
Come on.
No. If somebody's sitting in the gathering, like this is how I see the equivalent of the discussion. Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is giving his da'wah. You know, we always assume if we'd been at the time of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, we'd be, you know, on the front lines, etc. But there is a wonderful saying by Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anh, when he was in Kufa. They told him, Ya Abdullah, we wish we were with you in Badr. He said, why? We were fighting our family members. It was a huge fitna for us. Why do you wish for these things? Why do you assume, what he meant was, why do you assume you would have been on our side? Like in that battle taking place. There are things that we say today with Gaza that if you square it with the seerah would make you cringe. You know, like they're going out in Badr to fight, they don't have the means to be able to resist Quraysh. Allah says it in the Quran, you know, that he had to send angels to support them. The Munafiqeen said they're too much against you. What can you do against these people? It's the Zionists, man. Like, what are you, Dilly, going to be able to do against them? These days I say to these brothers and sisters, I'm like, listen, maybe you're right, but are you not scared that your words resemble the hypocrites of Medina as opposed to those who went out in Badr? Because they said the same thing, that they're way too many for you. Those who say, I'm scared, I want to be able to do Umrah and Hajj, I don't want to compromise that for me. Would you have said that to Rasulullah in the da'wah in Medina, during the 10 years he was in Medina, and told him, Ya Rasulullah, let's tone it down so we can go do Umrah? He makes the attempt to do Umrah when he's militarily capable of protecting himself, which is why Quraysh don't dare kill him when he goes towards it. They're worried that if they do, they will spark a big conflict with Medina again, and they've already lost in Badr, and they've already struggled in Khandaq. He does it from a position of power. And that's why the seerah is scary. I think that the Gaza is being betrayed by those who are too scared to raise their voices against the Muslim rulers who will be asked Yawm al-Qiyamah why they didn't do anything for Gaza. They will be asked on the day of judgment. I remember in Malaysia, a friend of mine was like, come to Malaysia and speak. So they were talking with some people here and there, and then they said, yeah, but if he comes here and talks about Palestine, everybody here is pro-Palestine. While they're making deals with BlackRock, while they're buying Boeing jets, while, you know, you're like, what do you mean? If that was the case, Malaysia would be at the forefront of being like, I don't want those Boeing jets. I don't want like BlackRock to make a deal with BlackRock. I'm going to take a stance for Gaza. They're not. It's not the case. And that's why what breaks the heart is not that the Ummah is powerless. It's not powerless, Dilly. Really, it's not powerless. It's that there are leaders who are at war with the Muslim population first, the Muslim rulers. They're at war with the Muslim population first before they're at war with oppressors and those who do injustice. They are expending all their resources to subjugate the Egyptian people, to subjugate the Saudis, to subjugate the Emiratis, to subjugate, etc. Instead of going outwards and going forward. I remember asking an Emirati friend when they came to London. I won't name who, I don't want them to get in trouble.
An actual Emirati.
Pure Emirati. If that even exists, because they're technically Arabs, and I think the UAE are desperately trying to come up with some history that justifies the UAE state. There's history of tribes. I don't know if there's a history of a state, you know, like same like with Qatar, same like with other places as well, which is why they're the ones who build the museums about the history of this so-called nation, as opposed to the tribe of Banu Tamim, many of which exist in Saudi Arabia. So I remember saying, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but as an Emirati, do you really not give a damn about Palestine? And I remember the person said, you don't understand. Or rather they said, that's an unusual question from you, Sami, because you know what it's like to live there. As long as you don't talk about Gaza, Palestine, as long as you don't talk about politics, you're safe. If you talk about politics, they can knock your door down. And they said sometimes we sit as friends and we'll be like, guys, this Palestine thing, how can our country be supporting it? And then the bathroom door will shut and we'll go, like worried that somebody's going to come, you know, like and grab you just for uttering it. Like the walls have ears in terms of what's happening. These regimes are at war with their own people because they're aware that if they, it's like Netanyahu said, we won't allow a caliphate to be established in the region. What does he mean? He means we're relying on the regimes to prevent one from taking place.
Ever.
We're relying on the regimes to make sure that people never get their way, because we're worried that if these people ever choose to be free, the border between Egypt and Libya will collapse. The border between Algeria and Tunisia will collapse. The border, Qatar will be swallowed up. UAE will be swallowed up. Kuwait won't exist anymore. Saudi Arabia won't exist anymore. All these borders will dissolve and they'll just suddenly become one again. And suddenly we're back to the days where we can't even defeat Salah ad-Din. He takes Jerusalem in like 1200s and the like, and it stays in the hands of the Muslims until... That's the biggest issue. And the reason I make all these points is to go back to that point, Dilly. You ask me about US, you ask me about Europe, etc. I'm not expecting them to save Gaza. I'm expecting them to support Israel. Wallahi, they are not doing anything out of turn. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised by the hypocrisy. I'm not surprised by the Islamophobia. I'm not surprised by the support for genocide. These are the same people who committed the Holocaust against the Jews. These are the same people who did colonization and established a world order based on colonization. These are the same people, they are the descendants within 2 generations who massacred 50,000 Algerians in 1 week just because they wanted to be free after France was liberated in World War II. I am not surprised. I'm not surprised when they allow Charlie Hebdo and all these leaders turn up for Charlie Hebdo journalists, but they don't turn up for genocide. I'm not surprised. I am aware of the hypocrisy of the places where I live. I'm aware that I can't expect them to. I am aware they have a fitra we can talk to, but I'm aware that their leaders will support oppression. I'm aware of that. Therefore, my attention is directed towards those who have power to do something. Why would I waste my time on... I mean, I'm talking to the people and telling them, you know, come on, the fitra, like the lady in San Diego. But if bin Salman can stop it tomorrow, yeah, bin Salman, hey, bin Salman, ittaqillah. Hey, don't spend the money on Jennifer Lopez. Spend it on lobbying to get Trump. Trump listens to you, yeah, bin Salman. Erdogan, Trump listens to you. Trump calls you a good leader. He calls bin Salman his friend. If you're going to give $1 trillion to the Americans, give it to Trump. Tell him, do a ceasefire in Gaza, I'll give you $1 trillion. Yeah, see, I'll go quiet. I'll say, you know what? Fine. We'll do a ta'weel for it. I'll call Dilly. I'll tell him, Dilly, don't talk about bin Salman for a year. This $1 trillion, if it buys a ceasefire, I'm willing to give that ceasefire. No problem. We'll make it like the story of the famous guy in the Roman Emperor who wanted to release some Muslims. The Roman Emperor told him, bow to me. He bowed to him so he could release the Muslims. No problem. I don't mind that whatsoever. But how can you turn, not you, but how can you, who you represent in the question, turn around to me as I'm calling on the leaders, begging them to do something for Gaza? How can you turn to me and say to me, why are you criticizing the rulers and telling them that they should do something for Gaza? Like, did you see? And that's what I mean by the hypocrisy of the very premise of the question. Something sounds good, but in reality, it's the sheer hypocrisy.
Now, look, let's circle back to an earlier point that you made, which is that the Saudi press, Al Arabiya, the Emirati press, internally, beyond the du'as, the aesthetics of any semblance of solidarity, are actually saying the Palestinians have caused this. The people of Gaza caused this.
And that they're treacherous.
They're treacherous. They don't want peace. Trouble causes all kinds of things. Let's put all of that aside for now. Do you feel that there could be any regret or self-reflection for any of those who are alive that were part of the events of October the 7th from the leadership of Hamas? As in, like, they did not expect, basically, can the genocide be blamed on them?
I think that there is a narrative that's going, should they have done October 7th or not and the like. But my issue is that it reminds me of those who said, should the Syrians have done a revolution in Syria or not? The idea being that, you know, there was a status quo that existed, you should have tolerated it. Like, that's better than what you have now. And the reason why I always push back on these is because the premise of the question implies that there is a choice in what was done. And I argue that oppressed people don't have choices. Oppressed people are in a status quo where they are denied choices, which is why the status quo breaks down. الظلم مؤذن بخراب العمران. That's the maxim by Ibn Khaldun. Oppression is what destroys a civilization. العدل أساس الملك. Justice is the foundation of dominion. And الظلم مؤذن بخراب العمران. And oppression destroys. With the question, the premise of the question, let's expand it, what you just asked. Would it not have been better for Gaza, for the Gazans, to stay in their concentration camp, to watch Netanyahu attack the Jenin refugee camp and prepare to annex the West Bank, to watch Saudi prepare to normalize ties and then bully your leadership into recognizing that normalization by inviting Mahmoud Abbas's team to Riyadh and then sending your Saudi ambassador that you established and then sending him to Jerusalem, to Al-Quds, to try to get him to pray in Al-Aqsa, so you could argue that normalization is blessed by Al-Aqsa and the Palestinians refuse to do so. You're telling the Palestinians this status quo whereby Erdogan now is shaking hands with Netanyahu and asking him to make economic deals where they can be mutually prosperous on the Mediterranean because he messed up on the lira, because he raised interest rates for 14 years and then woke up one day and said it's haram, I need to put them back down. You're saying to the Palestinian that as you watch the world forget you, as you watch the world turn on you, you idiots, you should have accepted the concentration camp. You're saying the Palestinians who watch the Israelis dance at the Nova Festival at the walls of that concentration camp, you're saying you should have danced with the music too. What's wrong? You didn't like the beat? You didn't like what was going on taking place? Oh, you oppressed people. You should have been the perfect victims. You should have been disciplined as victims. You should have been, as they slap you, you should have taken it. You should have turned the other cheek and say, slap me. You should have adjusted your face accordingly. Don't adjust it like this, adjust it like this. It will be better for you instead of bringing all this calamity that you're bringing over here. Yeah, jahala, you stupid oppressed people. You dumb oppressed people. You don't know how to be slaves properly. You don't know how to be colonized properly. You don't know how to accept another person stealing your land properly. You don't know how to be the perfect victims. Dilly, are you sure this is a question you want to ask? I'm not saying that October 7th, right or wrong, etc. I'm not saying that. I'm saying October 7th is a symptom, not the disease. And if you ever go to a hospital and the surgeon comes to treat you for a disease, you don't want him wasting time on a symptom. You want him to go to the disease directly because you only have 2-3 hours on that bed before you die. You don't want him saying, but why didn't you use hydrocortisone for the symptom spots over there? And you're telling him, you idiot, I've got a problem in my liver, fix my liver. And he's like, no, you should have used the hydrocortisone properly. Doctor, I don't have time. No, but the spots, you could have had a more relaxed version of your disease, but you chose to make your disease more difficult. The question doesn't make sense. And what I love, I think her name is Rahma, the Egyptian. She was speaking once at a conference in Turkey, and she said, I was watching the video, it came up on TikTok. May Allah protect and preserve TikTok for us, Ameen, and the khidmah it's done for this ummah. She said, why do you allow the other side to dictate the goalpost of your narrative? Why do you allow the other side to decide the boundaries of what you're talking about? Why do you allow them to focus on October 7th instead of focusing on the 70th? I'm not saying that's what they did to you. I'm saying that maybe October 7th may have been ill-advised. Allahu A'lam. Maybe if they had known it would lead to a genocide, they wouldn't have done it. Okay, fine. But that doesn't mean that the situation was better before than it is now. And the reason why I say this is, the reason that they took Israel by surprise on October 7th is because Netanyahu had moved troops from the Gaza border to the West Bank border in preparation for an invasion there. Netanyahu's plan was that Erdogan is now shaking my hand in New York, that bin Salman is about to normalize. This is my opportunity to take the West Bank. Netanyahu was going to war. The question as it's posed sounds nice. Was October 7th right or wrong? Because now we have a genocide. The question, if we ask it in its real state, is that Netanyahu was about to invade the West Bank with the silent complicity of Erdogan and the silent complicity, the silent complicity of Erdogan and bin Salman. Should we not just have allowed the West Bank to suffer the brunt of the invasion instead of those who are in Gaza? The reason I answer the question like this is, I am wary of, you know why I like, there is an organization called Ummatics by Uwaymir Anjum and Ashraf Moti. When they first came with the idea, it was a bit academic and stuff, and I was like, guys, you're talking to the wrong guy, like for academics. But there is something that Uwaymir said, or Dr. Uwaymir said, which really stuck with me. He said, my aim is to normalize Muslim lingua franca, Muslim terminology and Muslim narratives in mainstream discourse. We as Muslims should be able to talk about our issues as Muslims talk about it. And Muslims, we don't talk about the October 7th because we know it's a symptom. We talk about the occupation and the colonization of Palestine and how we can end that occupation colonization. And because we asserted that narrative, that's why Francesca Albanese now, she no longer talks about October 7th. She said it's irrelevant. You need to talk about colonization. Owen Jones, we need to talk about colonization. All of these people who weren't saying this stuff before. I'm not saying they were evil before. They weren't saying it before. They heard it enough times from us that now they're repeating it too. So I know I didn't answer your question per se, because for me it's a symptom. For me, if it wasn't October 7th, it would have been October 10th.
No, it's a response to, in case even if your average Muslims are now wondering that if there was any remote justification, if there was absolute justification, context, history, background, variables, realities that led to October the 7th, oh man, was it worth it? Look at all these dead people. Look, it's the entire Gaza is decimated. There wouldn't be 53,000 dead. There wouldn't be babies maimed. And I'm just saying, how would you respond if Muslims are having those thoughts?
My mother is Algerian, so I can get away with saying this.
Okay.
What do you make of the Algerian liberation independence of 1962?
A noble struggle.
Noble struggle. Your words, you said that just now, yeah? Noble
A
struggle.
noble struggle.
You would say it is something that the Muslim world celebrates to this day.
Absolutely.
It's a reference point for how a people can defeat a colonial power.
Yes.
In 1954, when the Liberation Front began, their initial plan was to bomb the celebration of this festival that the Pieds Noirs, the French who lived in Algeria, were celebrating. Amongst them were families and the like. And of course, it didn't go off because they moved too early and the like. And, you know, in the end, they were subdued. In 1955, there was a place called, I think it was called Philippeville. Now it's called, I think it was in Annaba or Skikda, I can't remember which one. In which the Algerians were informed that tomorrow the Liberation Front is going to come and they're going to shoot everybody up. So the Algerians silently left and the people came in and they shot everybody. They spared not a single French person in that city. Their justification was they don't deserve to be here in the first place because they're living here at our expense. It was a brutal massacre, so brutal that Algerians were put off the Liberation Front. They were put off the Liberation Front. They said, these are not the tactics that we want to use. This is disgusting what's been done here by the Algerian Liberation Front that was fighting for its independence. That today, when I asked you, how do you rate the independence? I'm not getting you in trouble. I'm saying, I'm talking about the history. This was in 1955 now. So Algerians, the Front Libération Nationale, they struggle to get popular support for what they're doing because of their October 7th moments and whatever, etc. Again, I'm not justifying it. I'm talking about history. In 1956, the French colonizers, they don't know how to handle these ambushes that are taking place, you know, from these. So they begin to brutally... Oh, by the way, before I get to the French point, the Liberation Front would go to villages where they'd have the Algerian judge who'd be in the service of the French colonizers. They would kill the judge and they would rip his guts out and leave him on the road as a sign for Algerians to say, if you cooperate with the French, they were brutal. Algerians are going to be livid by the time they get to this point. But if Algerians be patient with me, they'll see where I'm going with this. So ordinary Algerians were like, the people on record saying, I can't support this. They wanted to go through the peaceful route. Farhat Abbas and these guys and whatever. In 1956, the French were having problems in that they kept getting ambushed by the Liberation Front in different places, but they could never find where the fighters were. So the French decided to mow the lawn. They decided to go and bombard and brutalize and arrest and slaughter. They amplified the violence that had dulled down for 10 years after events of 1945. It dulled for 10 years. They began to, until Algerians said, whoa, these guys are so brutal, the French, in what they're doing. I'm going to go and join the ranks of the Liberation Front. Liberation Front started to alter some of its tactics here and there. But they provoked an environment that led to the Algerians eventually support. And then eventually, by the time they got independence, you know, it's like Nelson Mandela, terrorist in prison and then became a hero. Nelson Mandela took up arms.
Absolutely.
Against this. Nowadays, he's been whitewashed a little bit, you know, and he's a peaceful advocate. And he went to prison because he took up arms against the
ANC carried out very violent operations.
I can look back as an Algerian on Algerian history and say the tactics in 54, 55, 56, they're stomach churning. I don't think I could support as an Algerian, I can say, if you said it, Algerians would be like, you have no right to talk about the oppressed struggle and what happened, etc. What I'm saying is the reason I don't come to a moral judgment about the right or wrong with it, in terms of, no, let me rephrase that. The reason I don't dwell on 54, 55, 56 is because the tactics were wrong. But the reason being is because you can't blame the ones who did it, because the environment created the environment that led to it. The environment created that situation. Do you think a Palestinian, when he's born, dreams of taking up a gun and going and shooting up Tel Aviv?
No.
Do you think a Palestinian wakes up and says, my dream in life is to kill Jews?
No, they dream in life like every other ordinary.
Exactly. Do you think a Palestinian sees the doctors, the lawyers, the engineers, etc., wakes up and says, you know what? I don't want to live comfortably and drive a Tesla and drive a whatever, I don't know, whatever. He says, I don't want to live comfortably. I want to go into a tunnel and I want to go in. Do you think that's what Palestinian does? So what makes a Palestinian go? And that's why the Israelis, and this is why I said, don't worry, I'm going to circle back to it. It's why the Israeli leaders, multiple Israeli leaders, would later come out and say, if I was Palestinian, I would be Hamas. If I was Palestinian, I would take up arms, because they know the environment they created. So when you go to your question, was it right or wrong? Dilly, it's like asking me why is a bird, or some birds black and some birds are... I'm not belittling it. I'm saying it's irrelevant question. It's truly an irrelevant question. It's an irrelevant question because if you deal with the occupation and colonization, you don't have these events. And whatever happened October 7th does not take away the justice of the Palestinian cause. And this is why Ta-Nehisi Coates said it good. You see, I'm relying on the witness statements of the Israelis and now of African American with the legacy of apartheid and like. Ta-Nehisi Coates said that the reason that when the Israelis came to me and said to me, Ta-Nehisi, you don't know what happened in Palestine. You need to hear our version of the story. Ta-Nehisi Coates replied and said, guys, you guys don't understand. There is nothing you could say to me that justifies apartheid. There's literally nothing. There's no context you can give me that justifies what you're doing to the Palestinians. For him, he said, okay, you can tell me about all the bad stuff Palestinians did to you. That would never amount to a justification of apartheid. That's Ta-Nehisi Coates. Is he belittling the genocide? No. Is he belittling Israelis? No. Is he belittling the Jewish, trauma of the Holocaust? He's not. But he's making a factual moral point. Colonization leads to these symptoms. If you want to resolve the symptoms, go and resolve the disease. Be a surgeon with those that resolve the disease. But they keep the disease and then complain about the symptoms.
We mentioned him very briefly, but you said that there's a reason why you've not really spoken about him much, because of the precarious situation he finds himself. And that's the current president of Syria, Ahmed al-Sharaa. Syria has been free of Assad for the last 4 months, approaching 5 months. Events which took many by storm. We're very surprised. He's got many internal challenges. He's trying to reconcile, or there are successful attempts so far, to reconcile with the Kurdish East. You've got Israel in the south, in Daraa, making incursions. There's Turkey involved in the equation. You got Ahmed al-Sharaa visiting many Arab leaders. He went to Saudi, where met Mohammed bin Zayed. Many European leaders are meeting him. What's your thoughts on Ahmed al-Sharaa and Syria?
I think that Ahmed al-Sharaa has two advantages. The first is Trump, the second is Erdogan. I think that Trump's desire to leave Syria completely and give it to the hands of the Turks works in Ahmed al-Sharaa's advantage. I think Biden would have stayed there and made sure that you mentioned the Kurds. The reason the Kurds are reconciling with Ahmed al-Sharaa is not necessarily because of any outreach he did to them, although he did do an outreach. It's because they're aware that Biden would have continued to support them against Ahmed al-Sharaa.
Trump won't.
Trump absolutely will not support them against Ahmed al-Sharaa. They know that Trump is going to take his hands off Syria and Erdogan is going to enter and wipe them out. Not the Kurds. The SDF and the Marxist leftist Kurds who are brutalizing Kurds in those areas as well. We need to be very careful about this in terms of how we use the terminology in this, because there are many Kurds who are against the SDF and against the
we're talking about SDF, yeah.
SDF are concerned that if they don't make a deal with Ahmed al-Sharaa will just allow the Turks to come in and they will eradicate the SDF. So SDF are now fighting for their lives. The reason Öcalan now is going for a peace process with Erdogan is because he's aware when Democrats are in power, they stand a chance. When the Republicans are in power, they don't stand a chance. Öcalan is aware that in these next 4 years, Trump, if he takes his hand off Syria, Erdogan is going to run wild, like in that northeastern part of Syria. And therefore, it's better to make a deal with Ahmed al-Sharaa, better to be part of the government, better to find some sort of any deal they can make is better than going into a losing battle where they'll be attacked from the west by Ahmed al-Sharaa and attacked from the north by the Turks. That's what I mean when I say that Trump is a huge advantage for Ahmed al-Sharaa. The second advantage that Trump brings for Ahmed al-Sharaa is Trump is on good terms with Erdogan and is willing to listen to Erdogan over his own advisors. James Jeffrey has a famous piece in Al Monitor. He says James Jeffrey was Obama's envoy to Syria and then Trump's envoy as well. He said that under Obama, CENTCOM basically did whatever it wanted. Under Trump, we spent more time trying to convince Trump why we need to be in Syria than we did actually working in Syria. Trump kept saying, but Erdogan says this, but Erdogan says that. We found that Erdogan had his ear more than the official advisor, which is why when he says Erdogan's a good leader, Erdogan has a good relationship with the Americans, which is probably why he's not willing to jeopardize it for Gaza by any stretch of the imagination. In any case. So Ahmed al-Sharaa, that's first. The second advantage is Turkey, with its Bayraktars, with its weaponry, with its Muslim affinity. Erdogan is more aligned with the idea of Muslim brotherhood, not the political party, but the ideas of brotherhood in Islam, than perhaps other people would be in the land. So he's able to access military hardware. The disadvantage Ahmed al-Sharaa has is he has no money source. The Turks don't have money to give him. The Turks are already taking 50 billion from the UAE, and they are heavily reliant on money that's coming in from outside, and which is one of the reasons why they went and reconciled bin Salman and bin Zayed and these other powers as well. So Erdogan and Ahmed al-Sharaa have been trying to go to bin Salman to say to him, Ahmed al-Sharaa is saying, I promise not to allow Syria to be a base for anyone to conspire against you. You'll remember there was that guy, Egyptian guy who fought with Ahmed al-Sharaa.
Yeah, he was of HTS.
Who later did a video in his excitement at taking Damascus. That Sisi's next. Ahmed al-Sharaa realizes he needs money from Saudi, he needs money from UAE, and they will not tolerate any threat to Sisi, who's their ally. So Ahmed al-Sharaa quietly arrests, between quotation marks, arrests him, sits him down, tells him, look, I'm not going to put you in prison, I'm going to put you in a nice place. I just need you to be quiet. I get it. I sympathize and stuff, but I need money. I need you to shush. And I imagine the conversation went, khair. I get it. You know, we're brothers in arms and stuff like that. I'm willing to. Then Ahmed al-Sharaa goes to bin Salman in Saudi Arabia for two reasons. The first is he wants to do Umrah. Because the Taliban, if you remember when they kicked out the Americans, first thing they did was go to Mecca to say that this is an Islamic victory. It's a very good PR thing. And Ahmed al-Sharaa wanted the same thing. The second thing is, in my opinion, is that Erdogan wants to help Syria, but wants them to pay. And if they have no money, Erdogan is saying, go to the Saudis, let them give you money so that money can be given to me to pay for my services to help you rebuild Syria. I think Ahmed al-Sharaa went to bin Salman and they had the meeting there. And I think bin Salman wanted to suss them out. Where are they on the Islamic leaning? Are they more Salafis, you know, obey the ruler, you know, so they respect bin Salman? Or are they Ikhwani? You know, are they that kind of thing? It seems that however that meeting went, bin Salman wasn't happy. Because the oil tanker never arrived to Syria that bin Salman promised.
He made a nominal payment towards
15
the IMF,
billion, which is peanuts for
nothing.
You know, which absolutely
fish and chip change.
Which is sort of like, I'm willing to listen to you, but you still have to give me more. That's what that 15 million means. And we also saw after his meeting with bin Salman and his foreign minister going to UAE, the UAE still supported the insurrection in southern Syria, in that, you know, amongst that faction. When the Israelis went in, the Israelis and the UAE, they both made an attempt to try to pressure Damascus, which is why he ended up going in person to the UAE to promise them again and say, guys, please, I swear to you, I will not allow anyone to insult you here. I think the reason he's succeeding recently with the UAE...
But that southern faction disbanded pretty much around about the same time.
They disbanded, I think this week or the week before, after the visit to the UAE. And here's how I think happened. And I think I'm going to get in trouble here.
Try not to get trouble.
There is a man called Abdurrahman Qardawi. Son of the late Yusuf Qardawi. Allah yarahmu. Even if we disagree with some of his political things and what he said, you know, like, but in any case, Abdurrahman Qardawi was in the Umayyad Masjid where you were. Probably same time, I think, when you were there.
A few days apart.
Anyway, I'm not going to get you in trouble, don't worry. Abdurrahman Qardawi does a video where he, something along the lines of, liberation here in Damascus, Saudi, UAE, they don't like this liberation, you know, and inshallah the Ummah will be liberated. Syrians, to credit, Syrians don't do anything to him. Ahmed al-Sharaa doesn't do anything to him. As he's leaving, he goes into Lebanon. He gets kidnapped. Now, he's an Egyptian Turkish citizen. Under international law, he can only be deported to those two countries. UAE put in a demand that they want him extradited to UAE. Not a single statement from Turkey. Nothing. It reminded me a bit when Erdogan reconciled with bin Salman. Khadija Cengiz, the widow of Khashoggi, wasn't even invited to the palace beforehand, whereby, you know, like Erdogan could sit with her and say, look, I'm stuck. I need money. I don't want to throw you under the bus. Please understand my city. He didn't. Like, Khadija wasn't even like, you know, just sort of, get out of here, and they reconcile. It's something, not a single statement from Turkey about a Turkish citizen that they've been kidnapped and, on foreign soil. Then he gets deported to UAE, and now nobody knows where he is. Amnesty said nobody knows what his fate is. Ahmed al-Sharaa didn't go to UAE to ask about Abdurrahman Qardawi, and he went to say, look, Syria will not be a land in which anybody will threaten you. He went to bin Zayed, the normalizer, and said, yeah, bin Zayed. The paraphrasing is, of course, when I'm paraphrasing, just to make it the blunt politics, I need money. I need to rebuild Syria. I'm in no position to threaten you. I'm in no position to threaten bin Salman. My focus is only Syria. My focus is only on rebuilding my country. I have electricity 1 hour a day in Damascus. Even if I wanted to, I could not. Even if I wanted to threaten you, I could not. I'm not here to ask for anything except, bin Zayed, help me out, because it's in my interest for you to help me out as well, and we develop good ties and we can reframe the region. And I hate Ikhwan too. I hate Ikhwan as well, like I'm not from the Ikhwan as well. And I think bin Zayed must have looked and said, I like your reaction to the Israelis, where it's, you kept the peace. I like that Abdurrahman Qardawi is here, and neither you nor Turkey made any fuss about him whatsoever. I like that when the guy threatened Egypt, you arrested him and kept him quiet. I like, you're doing good things, Ahmed. I'm willing to entertain the prospect of giving you some money. And also, I think Ahmed al-Sharaa, his biggest power card is, we all hate Iran. I will make sure Iran never has a footing here, and Iran will be my priority before Israel. In this politically, he has a point. It's like, there's a very good video about Salah ad-Din before he goes to Jerusalem. He has to go and defeat the Zengids in Aleppo because every time he goes to Jerusalem, they keep hitting him from Aleppo and behind. Yep. Ahmed al-Sharaa, I think, might have given a similar example. I need to go to deal with the Iranians first, and the Iranians caused the big crisis in Tartus, their supporters, the Alawis and the like in Tartus, and he had to crush that as well in the beginning. My point is, I'm not making any judgment on it. These are the realities of what Ahmed al-Sharaa is dealing with. When Ahmed al-Sharaa wanted to assert Syrian sovereignty on Turkey, he announced those 200% tariffs. Erdogan flipped, said, how dare you? So he had to remove the tariffs. And now he's working closely with the Turks as the Turks. But here's the thing that I think is the biggest worry for Ahmed al-Sharaa. Gaddafi has I know Gaddafi's only ever quoted in conspiracy theories. But I'm quoting something that Gaddafi said, that he said to the Arab League once. I think the Arab League or to a meeting in Libya. He said that the Arabs need to be careful. He said one day there will be a border between Israel and Turkey. And everyone thought he's mad. Like, what do you mean there'll be a border? He said, Wallahi, one day there will be a border between Israel and Turkey, and they will agree between themselves, and the Arabs are the one who will pay the price for it.
That's a famous clip, that is.
Now, of course, it's Gaddafi said it, so no one took it seriously. I was sitting with a group of friends, and the news came that in Azerbaijan, Turkey and Israel are discussing the de-conflict zone in Syria.
Yep.
But there is no Syrian delegation in Azerbaijan. There's one there to discuss trade, but not in the meeting with the Israelis to discuss the de-conflict zone. Almost if what Gaddafi said has become true. Ahmed al-Sharaa's biggest problem is he is heavily reliant on the Turks. And Erdogan, although many Muslims have sympathies for, myself included, I put my hands up. I have deep sympathy for Erdogan because I'm aware of Erdogan's role in his fight against Kemalism, in bringing the freedom for hijab back, in the way that he's handled the Kurds and, allowing their language again, and his Muslim sentiments, and his foreign policy is very Muslim-centric. It is. I'm not taking that away from Erdogan at all. I know that Erdogan, in his mind, he dreams of Muslim power. Bin Salman dreams of Miami. Erdogan dreams of Muslim power. I acknowledge that. Erdogan dreams of, Hagia Sophia, of his power is manifested in building masajid, whereas Bin Salman, his power is manifested in Bikini Beach. Just so people don't think I'm exaggerating, I was in Bosnia. So we do groups often to Bosnia, and there's a group of students, they wanted to stay in, like a student accommodation next to a mosque and the like. So we found this place which was a waqf. It's a beautiful place, masjid, student accommodation, and a conference room on the top. We asked the guy, how is this funded? He goes, Wallahi, it used to be funded by a Saudi-backed waqf. Now we barely make ends meet. I said, what happened? He said there was a change of government in 2017 and he cut all funding for all the Muslim projects. Bin Salman doesn't see his power in Muslim projects. Erdogan does. So I'm doing that not as a caveat, but to acknowledge that I'm aware of it. But in the same breath, Erdogan is Muslim in good times, but a Turk in bad times. But I don't mean it as a derogatory term. What I mean is,
We'll elaborate on that.
in good times, it's Sen Ben Yok, me and you know, Ummat Muhammad is everything. When he's in trouble domestically, it's Sen Ben Yok, Turkiye var. It's me and you know, Turkey is everything. When he wants to reconcile when he's strong, the Syrian refugees are safe in Turkey. When he's weak and needs to reconcile with Assad, Syrians are deported. When he's strong and he wants to stand with his allies against Sisi, all of the opposition in Egypt are allowed to speak in Istanbul. When he's weak and he needs money from bin Zayed and bin Salman, he tells them, I need you to leave Istanbul. Or I need you to shut up and stop talking about Sisi. In good times, Ummah, in bad times, I'm not saying derogatory term, I'm saying politically. And politically, maybe he has a point. I'm not going to make a judgment on that. Ahmed al-Sharaa, his primary ally is Turkey. And that's as good as it can be bad. At the moment, it's very good to have Turkey as an ally. Erdogan, I think, dreams that the route to Jerusalem is through Syria and through Egypt. Netanyahu knows that Erdogan, in his ideal world, defeats Israel. Israel knows it. Israel knows that bin Zayed wants peace with the Israelis and wants to see Israelis in Abu Dhabi. Israel knows that bin Salman doesn't care about Muslim issues. Israel knows that when Erdogan says, I want ties with the Israelis, he's saying it through gritted teeth, that he ideally wants to. That is to Erdogan's credit. I'm saying all this so that people are aware. I'm putting things into context. Ahmed al-Sharaa, his biggest issue now is how do you assert Syrian sovereignty when you're so dependent on foreign powers?
Yep.
And how do you establish a relationship with the Syrian people who are expecting so much so quickly when you don't have the independent power to reconcile them unilaterally? What I mean is, there's a difference between Ahmed al-Sharaa being able to deal with the Syrians directly, and there's a difference between him having to deal with them by bringing UAE money to put in their pockets, by bringing bin Salman's money to put in their mouths, and by bringing Turkish weaponry in order to... Some will say that this is the beginning of the dissolution of borders, that this is Erdogan becoming more Ottoman, and Ahmed al-Sharaa should be a governor in this wider plan that's taking place. Syrians won't tolerate that as it stands now, and I don't know if Ahmed al-Sharaa will tolerate that now. But what I mean is there are all these different challenges, and Ahmed al-Sharaa has chosen to keep the peace, to make sure that everybody is appeased and is not worried about what will happen in Syria. And whether he succeeds in it, so far he's having his way. His last advantage, I mentioned Trump, Erdogan. His third advantage is that he took over the whole state. That it's not like Mursi had to deal with the Egyptian army. Sharaa doesn't have to deal with anybody in Syria.
And he replaced.
He replaced it and he formed his own army. He managed to reconcile those 27 different factions, and now the 28th has just disbanded. But he's managed to create his own army. That gives him a very unique advantage. He's able to get his way in Syria, and people, Syrians, I think they're willing to see whether he's going to go towards justice or towards... I think the issue is less about democracy versus whatever, and more about, can you deliver? Can you give us freedom? Can you give us justice? Can you give us prosperity? Can you give us etc.? If Ahmed al-Sharaa delivers on that front, I think he'll be fine. But I think a lot of that is not in his hands. But we'll see where it goes.
Final question to wrap up the podcast. We covered pretty much every country or most of the big players in the region. There is one player in the region which we haven't discussed in much detail, so let's finish up with them. And that's Iran. Closely linked to Syria. Hezbollah severely weakened in Lebanon. We know that the Palestinian Islamic Jihad leaders were arrested in Syria as we speak. Some are saying that this is the end of the axis of resistance. A war with Iran is looming. We've got a split within the Trump administration against those who want to go with war with Iran and those who don't. What have been your thoughts about Iran on those three fronts? The nuclear front, and a war looming with Israel via America. Number two, the end of what some used to say was that crescent, the Persian crescent, the Iranian crescent of influence and support, and has the axis of resistance come to an end? Let's wrap up on that.
I think the axis of resistance against the Sunni world has been broken. The reason why I give it its full title is because I don't think it was an axis of resistance against the Israelis by any stretch. You compare the death toll of Muslims that were killed by the axis of resistance versus the Israelis, there's no comparison whatsoever. I think that Ahmed al-Sharaa was able to take Syria because there is an Arabic phrase or dua that's often made, اللهم اضرب الظالم بالظالم واخرج من بينهما سالمين. Allahumma hit the tyrant with the tyrant and let us come out from between them safe and sound. Ahmed al-Sharaa is the one who came out from between them. Iran and the Israelis, two tyrants, went at each other. The Israelis decimated Hezbollah's capabilities, who were the spine of the Assad regime. The Assad regime could not survive on Syrian power. It survived on the Iranian proxies. When Israel smashed those Iranian proxies, an indirect effect was that Assad suddenly became so weakened militarily that Ahmed al-Sharaa could take place. This distinction is important. It doesn't mean the Israelis delivered Ahmed al-Sharaa. It means the Israelis unintentionally created a scenario that Ahmed al-Sharaa was able to come out from between them and take over Damascus.
They don't even deny that. If you speak to Ahmed al-Sharaa, his administration, goes, the timing was everything.
Because you met them, and I know you spent some time.
Hezbollah weakened, Iran weakened. This was the perfect
which
opportunity.
allowed it to go through. Yeah. I think it's also rattled the Houthis. So now that Trump has escalated against the Houthis, at the request of Saudis, at the request of the UAE, at the request of some ordinary Yemenis as well, as opposed to the request of the Israelis, there is a movement now on the part of the internationally recognized government in Yemen to begin a new offensive against the Houthis, to take Hodeidah and maybe finally take the capital back from the Houthis. In 2018, when the Yemeni forces tried to take Hodeidah, it was the Democrats that came in. Sorry, it was the American regime that came in to protect Hodeidah. And previously, when they tried to take Hodeidah, the Democrats also came and protected the Houthis and ensured and threatened the Yemeni army by preventing them from taking Hodeidah. They believe now that the Americans will no longer support the Houthis, because the reason they support the Houthis before was that we want to deal with Iran. Part of that is recognizing Houthis. We don't want the Houthis to jeopardize with Iran, so don't attack them. Now that Iran is under pressure, the Yemenis believe they can finally take Yemen back from the Houthis. The Houthis, of course, did a coup in 2014. They fought 7 wars because they believe only Ahl al-Bayt are allowed to rule Yemen. And so many Yemenis want to see the Houthis ousted. It was interesting as I went across different places. I would always have a Yemeni at the end of the talk who'd ask me a question and say, Sami, how do I reconcile the Ummah celebrating the butchers of my family? And they would say the same thing about Hezbollah. Sami, Syrians would say, Sami, how do I reconcile the Ummah celebrating the butchers of my family? How do I reconcile the Ummah celebrating the rockets that they're firing on Israel when these are the people who surrounded my family in Yarmouk and surrounded and shot and shouted, Ya Hussein and Ya Fatima and stuff, and were taking revenge for what happened to al-Hussein? Am I the one who is wrong by not supporting what's happening and taking place? As a result of Iran being weakened by the Israelis and by the Americans, Trump is trying to bully them into a preferable deal. Israel want war, Trump doesn't want war. What Trump wants is a maximum pressure to get a deal by which Iran dismantles its nuclear technology, and then they can go to America and say, I solved what Obama and Biden couldn't solve. The issue is, however, that although Iran is weakened, it still has the capability to frustrate the region. What I mean is this. The Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman sent his brother, the defense minister,
A couple of days ago.
Khalid bin Salman, to Iran.
And a statement was issued basically saying they wouldn't support an attack or a war in Iran.
The reason being is there is a fear in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia's policy with Iran is always based on the appetite in America for war. If there is an appetite for war in America, then the Saudis tend to try to make peace with the Iranians. If there's an appetite for peace with the Iranians, then the Saudis always amplify to try to push for more harder stance. Mm-hmm. Why? Because the Saudis believe that if there is peace between America and Iran,
it's bad for them.
Iran will get the proxies and surround Saudi Arabia. And, the Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, one of the pro-Iran militias in Iraq, famously said once to Iranian students, when they said, yeah, Mujahid, one day you'll be in Al-Aqsa. He goes, Riyadh first, Riyadh. Saudi is our priority, like we're going after. The Saudis believe in peace, the Americans might recognize Iranian proxies, and then Saudis will have to deal with this encroachment. But when there's war, the Saudis want to say, we want the Americans to fight, not us. Because we're worried that when the Americans go to war with the Iranians, we are the ones who are going to be hit. Houthis are going to fire rockets at us. They're going to hit our oil facilities. And the American public no longer supports war, so they won't allow the Americans to protect us in Saudi. And if they won't protect us in Saudi, we can't rely on, the army of Kebsa and Mendi to, protect our oil facilities. We're not used to war as Saudis. We're used to outsourcing. So we need the Americans to protect us. If the Americans won't protect us, we need to go and plead with the Iranians and tell them, Wallahi, if the Americans hit you, it won't be through us. Like, we'll have nothing to do with it. Which is why the Houthis always threaten to fire missiles. I think that Iran wants to now negotiate with the Americans. I think initially they were in rage over Syria. I think now that the Israelis and the Iranians are aligned on Syria, they want to see Ahmed al-Sharaa collapse.
Indeed.
I think that Iran is threatening from this side and Israel is threatening from the other side, which is a very ironic, coming together of. I think that the Iranians are now revising the way they develop the axis. Many of their politicians are coming out and saying, we no longer support Hezbollah, we no longer support...
We made mistakes.
Yep. The Lebanese government that the Americans and the Israelis and the Saudis and the UAE, they helped to broker, the Lebanese government now is seeking to disarm Hezbollah, which they might succeed in doing so this time. They may succeed. I think that the Iranians are trying to find a 5-6 year peace. They want to preserve the Houthis in Yemen and protect their allies in Iraq, to say at least this would be a stepping stone for us to try and access against the Sunni world again, in another period of time. Let's wait 5-6 years and make the peace. Bin Salman is raving and doing concerts in Saudi Arabia. He's not likely to be strong anytime soon. His economic projects are not doing very well. Trump wants a deal. Let's make a deal with Donald Trump. And I think in this regard, the Iranians are now licking their wounds. And I think the space that the weakening of Iran has allowed is a space that allows Turkey to really expand. And how Erdogan fashions that Turkish expansion will decide how the region looks like for the next generation. If Erdogan expands under the Turkish flag, then it may well be that it will cause new problems for the region. If he expands under the Muslim flag, I think Erdogan will leave Turkey in a position to be the most formidable unifying power in the Ummah. The problem Erdogan has with that is that while everybody is focused on the Iranians, he has not successfully pacified Kemalists or been able to fully assert himself in Turkey in a way where he can guarantee the success of his successor. And I think that's where there are much more question marks now than there were before. But I will say at the end of this analysis is, before Iran had a chokehold on Syria, on Lebanon, on Iraq and Yemen. With the weakening of Iran, there are possibilities that have now opened. It may not necessarily get better. It could get worse. But people will always tell you that the status quo was unsustainable as it was before, and therefore it is better to see what other status quo can emerge. And this is why I link this back to Gaza, in the sense that Biden lost because of Gaza. Trump came, ceasefire initially, then the Zionists did a campaign against Witkoff. They called him a Qatari agent, and they went after Trump, and they went after those around Trump. Trump eventually just went, oh, whatever, etc. But the one thing that is worth noting, Dilly, is this. Things are moving and things are changing. Netanyahu went to visit Washington on this recent visit, and there was one of those podcasters, those right-wing podcasters. He went to give an interview, and he said that Netanyahu gathered us all in a room, and he told us it was Chatham House rules. But he forgot, no one here is a journalist, so no one knows what Chatham House rules. So they were all recording themselves saying, I'm going to meet Netanyahu. So the presenter says, what did Netanyahu ask you? He said, Netanyahu said that we've lost the American public, and we need new podcasters to step up. We need to step up because this is dangerous for us. Because if we lose the American public, it will eventually be reflected in the government. Now 21% of Democrats support the Israelis. Less than 50% now of Republicans support the Israelis as well. All of these changes may not be the way that people want them to change. That's true. But they are changes that prove that no one is in full control. Not the Americans, not the Israelis, not the Europeans, not bin Salman, not bin Zayed. The beauty of everything that's happening in the midst of this chaos, I'm not talking about genocide here, I'm talking about Syria and these other places, and shift in public opinion, is that it shows you no one is in full control, which means there is always agency that exists in the Muslim world. No one thought Ahmed al-Sharaa would take Damascus in 10 days, not even the Turks, and not even Ahmed al-Sharaa himself, in my opinion. I think Ahmed al-Sharaa wanted to do a skirmish on Aleppo, and then then somebody called him and said, Commander, there's no resistance here. I'm in the middle of the city. And he went, what? And he said, okay.
Halep was the plan.
Halep was the plan. Then Homs, and then I think they were taken by surprise. The beauty of Syria is no one knew that Damascus was going to fall, not even the ones who took Damascus. 100%.
Sorry.
Which shows you Allah is the one who is the only one who knows everything. There's an Imam in our local mosque here, literally just here 5 minutes while we were recording. He gave a khutbah once, and he said that Imam Malik once saw a dream. He saw the Prophet Muhammad in a dream, and he said to Rasul in the dream, Ya Rasulullah, when will I die? So he said the Rasul in the dream did this with his hand. 5. So Imam Malik couldn't understand the dream. He sent his servant to go and ask Ibn Sirin, who was alive at the time. Ibn Sirin said, who asked for the dream first? He said it was Imam Malik. He goes, tell him that the Rasul was telling him in the dream that Allah is the one who knows the ghaib and knows what's in the womb, and no one knows where they will die. or what time they will die. And the ayah which has the 5 things that only Allah knows. So only Allah knows this. Only Allah is in control. The beauty of everything that's unfolding is Muslims used to think America rules the world. Syria shows they don't. Gaza shows they don't. Muslims used to believe that Israel run everything. Now we're realizing they don't have as much power as they used to. Netherlands, Netanyahu couldn't fly over it. Ireland, Netanyahu couldn't fly over it. And that means agency always exists. And this is what I mean when I say, I don't know if it will get better or worse. What I know is that possibilities are now there that weren't there before because of things we didn't think could happen. And the reason why I say this is to end on this point. I'm not optimistic about what comes next. I'm not. I'm optimistic that Allah is always in control. I'm optimistic whatever happens, Allah will never lose control of the affairs. I'm optimistic that even if Netanyahu escapes justice in this dunya, I'm optimistic that Yawm al-Qiyamah exists, that Day of Judgment exists. When some people, they say, I've heard some people say, they say, Sami, I can't stand listening to you sometimes. Because you always try to say, you're always too hopeful. You give the ummah more power than it deserves. I tell them, you're mistaking what I'm saying. It's like when they say, all you talk about is Saudi. I'm like, you're not listening. You're not listening to what I'm saying. You're hearing but you're not listening. I'm optimistic, not that Gaza, I'm not optimistic that Gaza will get better. It may get worse. They may take over the West Bank. They may even annex the West Bank. I don't know what's going to happen next. What I do know is كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام. At some point, this world is going to vanish and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to remain. Then Netanyahu will be dragged on his face Yawm al-Qiyamah. And all the oppressors, Biden, one by one, they will be dragged. Allah will not hold them to account privately. Whisper to the Wali al-Amr privately. No. Allah will bring Hind Rajab and He'll bring Sidra, He'll bring the Palestinians. He'll say to them, oh beautiful souls that were martyred, that still believed in me even when the crisis came in genocide. You didn't say why, oh Allah. You said Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel. Dilly in London was asking why, not you, but on behalf of us. But you didn't ask why. You were saying Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel. The Ummah was saying, what's the point? Why couldn't you be perfect victims? But you believed in me and you kept going. Come, watch how I bring your oppressors here in front of you. لا ظلم اليوم, لا ظلم اليوم. There will be no oppression on this day. Every Palestinian will pour their heart out. You know the kid who said, I will tell Allah what happened. Every kid will look at Allah and say to Allah, Allahumma, here is what happened to me. Allahumma, bin Salman partied with Jennifer Lopez, did nothing for me. Allahumma, Erdogan kept trading. Allahumma, bin Zayed kept normalizing and even had iftar with my butcher, with my killer. Allahumma, that was the pilot of the plane that bombed me. Allahumma, this was Smotrich. Allahumma, etc. Allah will say, bring Smotrich. The angels will drag him in those chains. Smotrich on that day will plead with Allah. He won't say, he will plead with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah, send me back just one day. If I hear the message, I'll believe in you, Ya Allah. And then Netanyahu will say the same thing. All the oppressors, they will say the same. People say, Sami, I don't like listening to you because you're too optimistic. I'm optimistic because I believe in Allah, because Allah said in the Quran that وَلَا تَقْنُطُوا مِنْ رَوْحِ اللَّهِ, do not despair in the hope of Allah, for the ones who despair in the hope of Allah are the ظالمين, are those who have wronged themselves. I would rather stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say, Allahumma, I knew this day would come, I never lost hope. I knew this day would come, I never despaired. I knew we'd be before you, Ya Allah, I never said what's the point. I knew we would stand before you and you would bring all the wrongdoers, Ya Allah. I knew it. Allahumma, I knew it with the certainty, like the certainty you created the earth. Allahumma, when they told me what's the point, I never doubted it because I knew if justice doesn't come in this dunya, it's coming in the akhirah. So I prepared, Ya Allah. I prepared by shouting. I prepared by speaking. I prepared by boycotting. I prepared by protesting. I prepared by using the means you gave me to do anything, even if it's an atom. Because Allah, when I read your Quran, you said, فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَى. Those who do even an atom of good deed, you see it. So I did the atom of good deed, Ya Allah. Even when people told me it would never liberate Al-Aqsa in my lifetime. Allahumma, I knew this day would come, I never doubted. What a wonderful day this is, Ya Allah. How you bring the oppressors. Ya Allah, they used to laugh at us, now we're laughing at them. They used to mock us, now we're mocking them. Allahumma, show us your justice, what you will do to to them and punish them for what they did to those in Gaza, to those in Sudan, and then the chains will come, Dilly, in front of your eyes. They will come and they will chain the oppressors with those chains of fire for Jahannam. Or you will see the justice done, not in ICC, not in ICJ. I am optimistic because Yawm al-Qiyamah is haqq, because Allah's justice is haqq. I know that it is coming a day when we stand before Allah and Allah will say, Yawma naqulu li Jahannam, halim talat, oh hellfire, are you full from the number of oppressors that Allah has thrown in? And we will see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will say, Yawma naqulu Jahannam, halim talat, it will be said, are you full, hellfire? And hellfire will say, if there is more space. Hal min mazid, we have the space because Allah's justice is infinite. I'm not optimistic that Gaza will be free in 10 years. I don't know. I didn't know Assad would fall within 10 days by Ahmed al-Sharaa. What I'm optimistic is that this ummah, its Lord is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, master of all affairs, the master of the day of judgment. And Allah promised that no one will escape justice. No one. If they escape it in this life, they will not escape it in the next life. So when people say that, Sami, why do you talk about the ummah that we should move and you talk about we have power, etc.? I say move so you save yourselves Yawm al-Qiyamah when Allah delivers that justice. So you have something to show Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Yawm al-Qiyamah. When that justice is delivered, you don't want to be the guy, Dilly, who sat at home saying, Muslims, what's the point? You want to be the guy, ha umuqra'u kitabiya. إني ظننت أني ملاق حسابيا. Guys, look at my book. Dilly, I knew I was coming. And you'll be like, Sami, I knew too. And you will have all your 5 pillars episodes. And I might have, some stuff that I did here and there. We'll be like, yes, Dilly. Like, we made it. Sure. We'll look at those people who say to us, or they will say, what was the point of what you guys did? We'll be like, look how heavy it became on the scale. Because Allah didn't ask us to liberate Al-Aqsa. Allah said, try. Allah didn't say, go and liberate Gaza. He said, try. Allah said, I've given you a certain set of skills and talent. Show me what you will do with it. So my ummah, and this is what I'm going to say, my ummah, it's not that I believe that Palestine will be delivered tomorrow. It's that Allah is the Almighty. Allah is the All-Powerful. And we are the ummah of His Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam promised that on Yawm al-Qiyamah all justice will be delivered. That Allah will not allow any wrong to go unpunished. ما لهذا الكتاب لا Netanyahu, or those who do oppression, they will receive their book. ما لهذا الكتاب لا يغادر صغيرة ولا كبيرة إلا أحصاها. They will look at the book and say, nothing is missed here. Every bomb, the serial number, every area, every shrapnel, every atom, it's all recorded here, everything that we did. And that's why what I love about Nuh alayhi salam is the dua that he makes at the end. We always talk about Nuh alayhi salam like he was frustrated. Like I've tried all this effort, all this dawah, and it's not working. But did you know, Dilly, Nuh never lost hope alayhi salam. And you know the proof? At the end of Surah Nuh, the final ayah of Surah Nuh, if I remember it correctly, the final ayah of Surah Nuh is that Nuh alayhi salam, رَبِّ اغْفِرْ لِي وَلِوَالِدَيَّ وَلِمَنْ دَخَلَ بَيْتِي مُؤْمِنًا وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ وَلَا تَزِدِ الظَّالِمِينَ إِلَّا تَبَارًا. He says, Allahumma, forgive me and forgive my family and all those who enter my house and they are believers, and do not give the disbelievers anything except greater try. Why? Nuh was saying, for the oppression that they committed, Allahumma, don't guide them. For the oppression they did, Allahumma, don't guide. What did Nuh mean? Nuh meant, Allahumma, I know the day of judgment is coming. I know justice is coming. Allahumma, let me see it. Allahumma, I can't see it in this lifetime. Let me see it, Ya Allah. And Allah gave it to him in the flood. Didn't even let him wait till Yawm al-Qiyamah. Allah gave it to him in the flood.
Sahih.
And that's the point. Muslim, be optimistic in Allah. Don't lose hope in Allah. Don't lose hope in Yawm al-Qiyamah. Don't lose hope that Allah will deliver His justice. And this is the point that I keep making. Is that in politics, the reason why I started this last part with the point when I said the beauty is no one is in control. America didn't know that Assad would fall. America didn't know all these changes in the region would take place. Neither did Israel, neither did Erdogan, neither bin Salman, neither bin Zayed, neither Anwar Ibrahim, neither any of these leaders. No one is in full control. And there's a beauty to that. Why? It means at any point, any dynamic can make the difference. You don't know what will be the straw that breaks the camel's back. A straw. Be that straw if that's all that you feel that you have. And you never know, that straw is what will be a mountain on the scales of Day of Judgment, inshallah, that will admit you into Jannah. And then you'll meet those Palestinians. And then inshallah, maybe you'll have a wonderful story to tell them. Well, when they tell you about what Gaza was like, you will tell them, I never forgot you. I kept moving for you. I kept begging my ummah to move for you. And I knew one day we would meet here. And here we are sitting, me and you over here. And let's tell our story to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when we're done telling him the story, Dilly, when you're done telling about 5 pillars and how it was hard to, I need to change your number to Muhammad Jalal, so you do whatever. When we tell him these jokes and Rasulullah, because we'll be so happy to meet him, we'll just pour everything to him. And remember, Muslim, always the ultimate goal of everything, which is, and this is the beauty of what I imagine, and may Allah bless Shaykh Umar Sulaiman, because I thought about it after his Jannah series, is that after Rasulullah finishes, we finish telling him the story. I've imagined telling him the story. I've imagined him telling him, Ya Rasulullah, this was my thinking. Ya Rasulullah, this is what I tried to do. I imagine at the end of it, when you really think, put Allah at the center, you think that, Ya Rasulullah, I'm so happy to be here. And then he says to you, but ya Sami, ya Dilly, we'll finish the story another time. We have to go somewhere. Where we're going, Ya Rasulullah? Allah has promised He'll reveal His veil for His beloved servants. He's about to reveal His veil for us. Does a Muslim not dream of seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
Of course.
Do you not? And on that day, the finality of that day, the eternity of that day, the eternity of Jannah, where you will no longer hear the pain, where you will have those palaces and those robes and those carpets, and you'll be able to meet all of the Sahaba. You'll be able to meet all of those Muslims, all of the martyrs of Gaza, all the martyrs of Palestine. Will this dunya matter anymore? And this is the point that I'm saying. Move with what you have, for wallahi, no one will escape justice. No one will escape it. If it doesn't happen ICC, ICJ, it will happen in the greatest of courts. And Dilly, I believe it the way, with the conviction of me seeing you before me. I believe it as I see you in front of me, as I believe you to be Dilly Hussain. I believe it wholeheartedly that Day of Judgment is coming. I believe Yawm al-Qiyamah is coming. And although it terrifies me on a personal level, that maybe I won't be enough to go to Jannah, it gives me peace, Dilly. Because it shows me no matter what I do, as long as I keep moving, as long as I keep mobilizing, I may not see Al-Aqsa liberated, but when I'm there Yawm al-Qiyamah in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'll make sure that on that book when they will write, I at least made the effort. And when I go to Jannah, inshallah, I hope when I see those Palestinians, and I see them and I say to them, this is what I did. Was it enough, Sidra? Was it enough, Hind? Wallah, I tried. Hind, I tried. Like, really, Sidra, wallah, I tried. I saw your legs being blown off. I tried, like, really. I left my family for long stretches. I would go and try and beg people to punish Biden. I don't know if it was I think it was the right thing to do. I think, but, Trump ended up doing the genocide as well, and we had to fight fascism of genocide, and then we had to fight. Was it enough? Was it enough? And I hope Yawm al-Qiyamah, when we meet them, Dilly, they will look at us and say, it was enough. Don't worry, you're here. You're here, right? You're here with us. You're here. It's enough. That's what I want to strive for. I want to strive for the akhirah, and the dunya is merely a means to get to it. So every Muslim should move. Every Muslim should get up. Muslims should stop telling each other what's the point. They should stop saying, why do we keep talking and not achieving anything? They should get up and move and do anything, for you don't know what atom it is that will get you to Jannah. And picture Yawm al-Qiyamah, all those oppressors, they will be punished by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and praise be to Allah that He is the one who will punish them.
On that note, let's end this episode. Sami, my dear brother, it was an honor having you back on. Let's pray that your next appearance isn't 2 years later. May Allah accept your efforts, make it easy for you. May Allah make your way heavy in your mizan. And may this episode and all your engagements be a source of empowerment for the Muslim Ummah. Ameen ya Rabbi.
Appreciate it.
The honor was all mine, dear brother. Brothers, sisters, friends, I hope you all thoroughly enjoyed this extensive episode as much as I did. Please remember that you can find this episode on all 4 seasons and all the major audio platforms. And of course, if you tuned in via YouTube, do remember to click subscribe. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.